Stop staring at the bride. Look at me. Those 7 words, spoken loud enough to shatter the polite hum of champagne glasses and string quartets, changed everything. In a room full of strangers pretending to be happy, one woman dared to demand what she wanted, and one man finally stopped running from what he needed. This is the story of 2 broken people who found each other in the last place they expected, at someone else's wedding, in front of everyone, with nowhere left to hide. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever wondered if it's too late to start over, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Because sometimes love doesn't whisper, sometimes it shouts. The Langston Hotel ballroom smelled like lilies and expensive wine, the kind of place where every surface reflected light and every corner whispered wealth. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls from vaulted ceilings, casting fractured rainbows across white tablecloths and gold-rimmed china. A string quartet played something classical and forgettable in the corner, the notes drifting through conversations about stock portfolios and vacation homes in the Hamptons. Ethan Walker stood near a marble pillar at the edge of the reception hall, holding a glass of champagne he hadn't touched in 20 minutes. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not really. The invitation had come from a colleague, someone he'd worked with years ago on a corporate merger, someone who probably sent invitations to everyone in his old Rolodex just to fill seats. Ethan had almost declined. He'd written the regret card twice. But Sophie, his 12-year-old daughter, had insisted. "Dad, you need to go out more," she'd said, looking up from her homework with those eyes that were too wise for someone who still watched cartoons on Saturday mornings. "You can't just work and come home. That's not living." So here he was, living, or at least pretending to. He watched the bride and groom sway on the dance floor, wrapped in each other like they were the only 2 people in the world. The bride's dress caught the light with every turn, a cascade of white silk and delicate lace that seemed to glow from within. She was laughing, the kind of genuine, unguarded laugh that made everyone around her smile reflexively. The groom looked at her like she'd hung the moon just for him. Ethan's chest tightened. It wasn't jealousy. It was something older than that, something that lived in the space between memory and regret. In the photographs he kept in a drawer because looking at them hurt too much, but throwing them away felt like erasure. 5 years. 5 years since the accident. 5 years since the phone call that split his life into before and after. 5 years since he'd stood in a different reception hall in a different city, holding hands with a woman who'd promised him forever and actually meant it. "You're doing it again." Ethan blinked, pulled from the past by a voice he didn't immediately recognize. He turned to find a woman standing 3 feet away, holding a martini glass with one hand while the other rested on her hip. She was maybe late 30s, dressed in an emerald green dress that hugged her frame with confident simplicity. Dark hair fell past her shoulders in loose waves. Her expression was difficult to read. Not hostile, not friendly, observant. "Doing what?" Ethan asked, his voice rustier than he'd intended. "Standing alone at a wedding, looking like you'd rather be literally anywhere else." She tilted her head, studying him with brown eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "You've been glued to that pillar for 45 minutes. I timed it." "You were timing me?" "I was bored." She took a sip of her drink, not breaking eye contact. "Weddings are supposed to be joyful. You look like you're attending a funeral." Ethan felt heat creep up his neck. I'm fine." "Sure you are." She stepped closer, into the ambient glow of the pillar's accent lighting. "Let me guess. You're here out of obligation. You don't know the couple that well. You're counting the minutes until you can leave without being rude. And you've been staring at the bride like she's a ghost." The accuracy of her assessment landed like a punch to the sternum. Ethan opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it. What was the point? She was right. "That obvious?" he managed. "To someone paying attention?" She shrugged. "Yeah. And you were paying attention because you're my neighbor." Ethan's brain stuttered to a halt. He looked at her, really looked at her, and recognition finally clicked into place. The house 3 doors down. The dark blue sedan that parked in the driveway around 6:30 most evenings. The woman he'd waved to maybe a dozen times in 3 years. Always in passing, always with the vague guilt of someone who knew he should probably introduce himself properly, but never quite found the time. Maya, she supplied, saving him the embarrassment of admitting he didn't remember her name. Maya Lynn, we've been neighbors for what, 3 years now? And this is the first time we've actually had a conversation. Sad, really. Yeah, I'm sorry. I work a lot, and with my daughter, Sophie, right? Maya's expression softened slightly. I've seen her outside sometimes. She seems like a good kid. She is. Ethan felt some of the tension in his shoulders ease. She's the reason I'm here, actually. She said I needed to get out more. Smart kid. Maya glanced toward the dance floor, where the bride and groom were now surrounded by other couples, all swaying to a slower song. So why aren't you dancing? That's usually what people do at weddings. I don't really dance. Or you don't dance anymore? The question hung between them, weighted with implication. Ethan felt the familiar urge to deflect, to build the walls higher, to retreat into the safe numbness he'd cultivated over 5 years of just surviving. But something about the way Maya looked at him, direct, unflinching, but not unkind, made him hesitate. Anymore, he admitted quietly. Maya nodded, as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. She finished her martini and set the empty glass on a passing waiter's tray with practiced ease. Well, she said, turning back to him, that's about to change. Before Ethan could process what was happening, Maya grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the dance floor. His champagne glass nearly slipped from his other hand. He managed to set it on a nearby table as she dragged him through clusters of conversations and around tables topped with elaborate centerpieces. Wait, what are you doing? Ethan's protest was drowned out by the music shifting to something upbeat, something with brass and percussion that made people clap and laugh. Saving you from yourself, Maya called over her shoulder. You can thank me later. They reached the edge of the dance floor just as the song hit its stride. Maya spun to face him, still holding his hand, her eyes bright with something that might have been mischief or challenge or both. I don't know how to, Ethan stammered. Sure you do. Everyone knows how to move to music. You're just scared of looking stupid. She stepped closer, placed his free hand on her waist, and started moving. Lucky for you, everyone here is tipsy enough that they won't notice if you step on my feet. That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be. Now move. And somehow, impossibly, Ethan did. It was clumsy at first. His feet felt like they were made of concrete, his rhythm non-existent. But Maya was patient, guiding him with subtle shifts of weight and gentle pressure on his shoulder. She didn't laugh when he stumbled. She didn't make a big deal out of his obvious discomfort. She just kept moving, kept pulling him along until something in his body remembered how to do this. The song changed, then another. Ethan lost track of time, caught up in the strange, disorienting sensation of being present in his own body for the first time in years. Maya talked while they danced, nothing deep, just observations about the wedding, stories about her job at the planetarium, a joke about the ridiculous ice sculpture melting near the buffet table. Her voice was easy to listen to, a steady anchor in the chaos of music and motion, and too many people in too small a space. You work at a planetarium? Ethan asked during a slower song, his voice less strained now that he'd found something close to a rhythm. Director of Education, Maya confirmed. I teach people about stars, mostly kids, but sometimes adults who never grew out of the whole space is cool phase. That sounds amazing. It is, most days. She met his eyes, and for a moment the noise around them seemed to fade. What about you? What do you do when you're not avoiding weddings? Corporate law, mergers and acquisitions. It's exactly as boring as it sounds. I doubt that. Nothing's boring if you're passionate about it. I'm not. The admission came out before Ethan could stop it. I'm good at it, but I'm not passionate about it. So why do it? Because it pays well. Because it's stable. Because when you're a single parent, you don't get the luxury of chasing passion. You chase security. Maya was quiet for a moment, processing. The song swelled around them, something about second chances and new beginnings that felt almost too on the nose. How long? She asked finally. How long have you been doing this alone? Ethan's throat tightened. He could have lied, could have deflected, could have pulled away and ended this conversation before it went somewhere he wasn't ready to go. But there was something about Maya, the way she asked questions like she actually wanted to hear the answers, that made him want to be honest. 5 years, he said. My wife died in a car accident when Sophie was 7. Drunk driver. She was coming home from a work event and he stopped, the familiar story catching in his throat like it always did. It was quick, that's what they told me, like that's supposed to make it better. I'm sorry. Maya's voice was soft, but not pitying. I can't imagine. You don't have to imagine. You just have to survive it. And then you keep surviving it, every day, until one day you realize you've built a whole life around survival and forgotten what living actually feels like. The words came out harder than he'd intended, edged with bitterness he usually kept buried. But Maya didn't flinch. She didn't offer empty platitudes or try to fix him with positive thinking. She just held his gaze and nodded, like she understood something about loss that didn't require explanation. I was married too, she said after a beat. Divorced, not widowed, but still. I get the whole building your life around surviving thing. It's easier than figuring out who you are when the person you built yourself around is gone. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Recognition, maybe. Or relief. The relief of being seen by someone who didn't need the whole story to understand the shape of the wound. How long? He asked. 2 years since the divorce was final. 3 since he moved out. Maya's expression was carefully neutral. No kids. No dramatic reason. We just stopped being what the other person needed. And instead of fighting for it, we let it go. Sometimes I think that makes it worse, knowing we could have tried harder but chose not to. Do you regret it? Some days. Other days I wake up and remember what it felt like to live with someone who looked through me instead of at me, and I know it was the right call. She paused, then added, loneliness is hard, but being lonely with someone else is harder. The song ended. Another began. They kept dancing. Ethan became aware of other things. The warmth of Maya's hand in his, the faint scent of her perfume, something floral and subtle. The way she moved with confidence, like someone who'd made peace with taking up space in the world. The way her eyes crinkled slightly when she smiled, like she was always on the verge of laughing at some private joke. And then he became aware of something else. The bride. Spinning past in her husband's arms, radiant and glowing and so unbearably alive that it made his chest ache all over again. Ethan's gaze followed her without conscious thought, tracking her movement across the floor the way you'd track a bright light in peripheral vision. For just a moment, she wasn't a stranger getting married. She was every bride he'd ever known, every promise of forever, every hope that shattered against the reality of entropy and drunk drivers and the fundamental unfairness of the universe. He didn't realize he'd stopped moving until Maya stepped back, breaking the frame of their dance. Her expression had changed. The easy warmth from moments ago was gone, replaced by something sharper. Not anger, exactly. Disappointment, maybe. Or determination. Ethan, she said, her voice cutting through the music with startling clarity. He blinked, pulled back to the present. Yeah? And then Maya did something that would change everything. She didn't lower her voice, didn't pull him aside for a private conversation. She stood right there, in the middle of the dance floor, surrounded by dozens of couples and waiters and wedding guests holding champagne flutes, and she spoke loud enough for half the room to hear. Stop staring at the bride. Look at me. The effect was immediate and total. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. The couple dancing next to them stumbled slightly, the woman's eyes going wide with surprise. Even the string quartet seemed to falter for half a beat, though that might have been Ethan's imagination. Ethan felt every molecule of blood in his body rush to his face. His hands went numb. His brain short-circuited, caught between mortification and the absolute certainty that he needed to say something, anything, to break the sudden, suffocating silence that had fallen over their immediate area. I wasn't, he started. Yes, you were. Maya's voice was quieter now, but no less intense. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. You've been staring at her all night, at them, at what they have, and I get it, I do. But I'm standing right here, and I'm real, and I'm asking you to see me instead of whatever ghost you're chasing. Ethan's mouth opened and closed uselessly. Around them, people were starting to look away, uncomfortable with witnessing something so raw and unscripted. The music swelled to cover the awkwardness, and dancers began moving again, pretending they hadn't just seen a neighbor call out a stranger in the middle of a wedding reception. But Ethan couldn't move, couldn't look away. Because Maya was right. He had been staring at the bride, at the promise of permanence, at the fantasy that some people got to keep their happy endings while others watched from the margins, wondering where they'd gone wrong. And in doing so, he'd been looking right through the woman in front of him, the woman who'd timed how long he'd been hiding by a pillar, who'd pulled him onto the dance floor when he would have spent the whole night alone, who'd shared her own story of loss without making it a competition, who was asking, no, demanding, that he acknowledge her as a person, not just background noise in someone else's celebration. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, and meant it. "You're right. I am." He stopped, struggling for words that didn't sound like excuses. "I don't know how to do this anymore." "Do what?" "This." He gestured vaguely at the space between them, at the dance floor, at the whole impossible concept of being a person who could exist in the world without armor. "Be around people. Let them in. I've spent 5 years building walls, and I'm good at it. Too good. And now I don't know how to take them down, even when I want to." Maya's expression softened, but she didn't let him off the hook. "Do you? Want to?" It was the kind of question that demanded honesty. The kind that could change trajectories if answered wrong. Or right. Ethan thought about Sophie, who watched him with worried eyes when she thought he wasn't looking, who asked if he was happy with a hesitance that suggested she already knew the answer, who was growing up with a father who'd forgotten how to be anything other than functional. He thought about the last 5 years, the endless cycle of work and home, home and work, punctuated by school events and grocery runs and nights spent staring at his laptop until the words blurred together, the safety of routine, the prison of it. He thought about Maya's hand in his, warm and solid and real, about the way she'd looked at him like he was worth seeing, worth challenging, worth the effort of dragging onto a dance floor against his will. "Yeah," he said finally, the word coming out rough but certain. "I do." Maya held his gaze for a long moment, searching for something, sincerity, maybe, or commitment. Whatever she found must have satisfied her, because she nodded and extended her hand again. "Then let's try that dance one more time. And this time, keep your eyes on me." Ethan took her hand. They danced until the bride and groom cut the cake. They danced through the bouquet toss and the garter removal and the increasingly drunk speeches from college friends who probably should have been cut off 2 drinks ago. They took a break to grab food from the buffet table, crab cakes and tenderloin and roasted vegetables that Maya declared acceptable for overpriced wedding catering. They stood by the windows overlooking the hotel gardens, watching other guests filter in and out of conversations, and Maya told him about the planetarium's upcoming exhibit on black holes, while Ethan listened and asked questions and felt something in his chest unclench for the first time in recent memory. "You know what's wild about black holes?" Maya said, gesturing with a champagne flute she'd acquired somewhere along the way. "They're technically just gravity taken to an extreme, density so intense that not even light escapes. But they're not evil. They're not trying to destroy things. They just exist, warping everything around them because that's what physics demands." "Are you comparing me to a black hole?" Ethan asked, fighting a smile. "Maybe. You do seem to have a gravitational pull toward wallowing." She bumped his shoulder with hers. "But black holes also create. They shape galaxies. They forge elements that couldn't exist otherwise. Destruction and creation, all wrapped up in the same phenomenon." That's pretty poetic for astrophysics. "Everything's poetic if you look at it right." She turned to face him fully, her expression serious but warm. "I'm not trying to fix you, Ethan. I don't even know if you need fixing. But I think maybe you need someone to remind you that there's more to existence than just surviving. That's all." Before Ethan could respond, before he could even begin to formulate what he wanted to say to that, a commotion near the dance floor drew their attention. The DJ was calling for all single women to gather for the bouquet toss. Maya groaned. "Oh God, I hate this part. You don't have to..." If I don't go, my aunt will ask me why I'm not participating, and then I'll have to explain that standing in a crowd of desperate women competing for flowers feels like a sociological experiment I'd rather not be part of, and that'll turn into a whole thing. She drained her champagne. Wish me luck. She joined the cluster of women gathering near the center of the room, young and old, eager and reluctant, all pressed together with varying degrees of enthusiasm. The bride climbed onto a chair, her dress hitched up slightly to avoid tripping, and held the bouquet high. "Ready?" The DJ's voice boomed through the speakers. "No!" someone shouted, and everyone laughed. The bride counted down from 3, then launched the bouquet backward over her head. It arced through the air in slow motion, spinning end over end, ribbons trailing like a comet's tail. Women jumped, hands reaching upward. Someone shrieked. Someone else stumbled backward in heels that were clearly not made for athletic competition. And then, impossibly, the bouquet landed directly in Maya's hands. She caught it reflexively, more out of self-defense than intention, and stood there looking stunned while everyone around her erupted into applause and whistles. The DJ laughed. "Looks like someone's getting married next." Maya's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, embarrassment, amusement, and finally a kind of resigned acceptance. She raised the bouquet over her head in mock triumph, playing along with the performance because that's what you did at weddings. You played along. But when her eyes found Ethan's across the room, her expression shifted into something more complicated. A question, maybe, or a challenge. Ethan felt his pulse kick up a notch. The rest of the reception blurred together after that. More dancing, more conversation. A tipsy uncle gave a toast that was equal parts heartfelt and inappropriate. The bride and groom made their grand exit through a tunnel of sparklers held by guests on the hotel's front steps. And through it all, Ethan kept finding himself drawn back to Maya, to the way she laughed with her whole body, to the sharp observations she made about wedding traditions and human behavior, to the fact that she didn't try to fill every silence with chatter, comfortable enough to just exist in the spaces between words. By the time the reception officially ended, it was past midnight. Guests trickled toward the exits in groups, calling for Ubers and designated drivers, heels dangling from tired fingers. The hotel staff had already started breaking down tables, moving with the efficient precision of people who'd done this 1,000 times. Ethan found Maya near the coat check, retrieving a light jacket despite the warm June night. "Hey," he said, suddenly awkward now that the safety of the event was ending. "I just wanted to thanks for tonight, for pulling me out of my head. I needed that." Maya smiled. "You're welcome. Though technically I was just being selfish. Like I said, I was bored. Still, I'm glad you were." They stood there for a moment, the hotel lobby humming with the sounds of departure. Rolling suitcases, car engines, muffled goodbyes. "So," Maya said, "we're neighbors." "We are. Which means this doesn't have to be one of those we talked at a wedding and now we'll never see each other again situations." "It doesn't," Ethan agreed, his heart rate picking up. "Good." Maya adjusted her jacket, the bouquet tucked under one arm. "Because I'm going to be honest with you, Ethan. I don't want to go back to being strangers who just wave from our driveways. I think—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think maybe we could both use someone who understands what it's like to rebuild from wreckage, someone who won't judge the mess." Ethan felt something tight in his chest finally, fully release. "I'd like that." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Maya nodded, satisfied. "Then maybe you and Sophie would want to come to the planetarium sometime. We have a new exhibit on the Apollo missions. Kids usually love it. Adults too, if they're willing to remember what it felt like to think space was magic. Sophie would love that. Sophie would. And honestly, so would I." "Good. Then it's a plan." She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "Give me your number. I'll text you the details." They exchanged numbers like two people who just decided something important, even if neither of them was quite ready to name what that something was. As Ethan drove home through empty streets, streetlights painting the pavement in amber pools, he couldn't stop replaying the night in his head. The moment Maya had grabbed his hand. The moment she'd called him out in front of everyone. The moment he'd decided to stop hiding and actually be present. Stop staring at the bride. "Look at me." 7 words that had shattered 5 years of carefully constructed numbness. He pulled into his driveway, killed the engine, and sat in the darkness for a moment. The babysitter's car was still parked out front, Mrs. Chen from next door, who never minded staying late as long as he texted ahead. The house was quiet when he entered. Mrs. Chen was knitting on the couch, some British mystery show playing at low volume on the TV. "How was the wedding?" she asked, setting aside her needles. "It was—" Ethan paused, searching for the right word. "Unexpected." Mrs. Chen smiled knowingly. "The good kind of unexpected?" "Yeah, I think so." "Good. You deserve good unexpected." She gathered her things and headed for the door, then paused. "Sophie's asleep, but she asked me to tell you she wants to hear all about it tomorrow. She was worried you'd spend the whole night by yourself." Ethan felt a wave of affection for his daughter, too wise, too worried, too invested in his happiness at an age when she should only be worried about homework and friends and whether her favorite show was getting renewed. "Tell her I'll make pancakes for breakfast," he said, and that she was right about needing to get out more. After Mrs. Chen left, Ethan stood in the kitchen, not quite ready for sleep despite the late hour. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from an unknown number. "This is Maya. Just making sure you actually gave me your real number and didn't pull a fake digit situation to escape my planetary science enthusiasm. Also, I'm keeping the bouquet. Figure it'll make good fertilizer once it dies." Ethan smiled, typing back, "Real number confirmed. And I think bouquets are supposed to be good luck, not compost." 3 dots appeared. Dancing. Luck, compost. Same difference. Both require breaking things down to create something new. That's very philosophical for 12:30 a.m. Sleep is overrated. Space facts are eternal. Did you know that time moves slower near massive objects? So technically, tonight lasted longer than we think it did. Physics says so. Ethan leaned against the counter, grinning at his phone like a teenager. When was the last time he'd done that? When was the last time someone's words had made him feel anything other than tired? Does physics also say when you'll send me those planetarium details? Impatient. I like it. How's next Saturday? We're doing a special program on lunar eclipses. Very dramatic. Lots of shadow play. Sophie will either love it or think it's the nerdiest thing ever. She'll love it, trust me. Then it's a date. Well, not a date. A friendly neighbor educational outing. Very different. Ethan hesitated, his thumbs hovering over the keyboard. This was the moment. The moment where he could keep it safe, keep it casual, keep it exactly what Maya had just described. A friendly neighbor educational outing and nothing more. Or he could be honest. What if I want it to be a date? The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. Finally. Then I guess it's a date. Fair warning, though. I talk a lot about stars, and I expect you to at least pretend to be interested. I won't have to pretend. We'll see. Get some sleep, Ethan Walker. Big day of planetary science awaits. Good night, Maya Lin. Good night. Ethan climbed the stairs to his bedroom, feeling lighter than he had in years. He checked on Sophie, dead asleep, sprawled across her bed in that boneless way only children could manage, her phone charging on the nightstand. She'd left a note on his door, written in her careful handwriting. "Hope you had fun, Dad. You deserve it." He saved the note, folding it carefully and tucking it into the drawer where he kept important things. Then he got ready for bed, moving through the familiar routine with unfamiliar energy. As he lay in the darkness, listening to the house settle around him, Ethan realized something fundamental had shifted. The walls hadn't come down, not entirely, but Maya had found a door he'd forgotten existed and reminded him that it could still open. He thought about the bride spinning in her husband's arms, about the jealousy he'd felt, the grief that rose up like a tidal wave whenever he saw people existing in the happiness he'd lost. And then he thought about Maya, bouquet in hand, looking at him across a crowded room like he was worth the effort of being seen. Stop staring at the bride. Look at me. He was looking now, and for the first time in 5 years, he wanted to see where that might lead. Outside, the June night hummed with possibility, crickets and distant traffic, and the vast, indifferent stars that Maya spent her days teaching people to love. Somewhere 3 doors down, she was probably still awake, scrolling through astronomy journals or planning lessons or doing whatever it was that people did when they'd just upended a stranger's carefully ordered world. Ethan closed his eyes, a smile still playing at the corners of his mouth. Tomorrow, he'd make pancakes. He'd tell Sophie about the wedding, about Maya, about the planetarium trip. He'd watch his daughter's face light up with hope and relief that her father might finally be learning to live again instead of just exist. And next Saturday, he'd go on a date, a real date, not a friendly outing, with a woman who'd looked at his brokenness and decided it was worth showing up for anyway. It wasn't a happy ending. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Life didn't work that way, didn't promise neat resolutions or permanent fixes, but it was a beginning, and sometimes that was enough. The morning after the wedding arrived with the kind of bright, insistent sunlight that made sleeping in impossible. Ethan woke to the smell of coffee he hadn't made and the sound of Sophie moving around downstairs with the particular brand of noise only 12-year-olds seemed capable of producing, not quite loud enough to be deliberate, but persistent enough to ensure he wouldn't stay asleep. He checked his phone before getting out of bed, a habit he'd developed over years of being on call for work emergencies. But this morning, he wasn't looking for client emails or case updates. He was looking for messages from a number he'd saved last night under a simple contact, Maya. There was one, sent at 7:30 in the morning. Good morning. Fair warning, I'm a morning person. I know this makes me a monster in some people's eyes, but I made the executive decision to text you anyway because I remembered something important about Saturday. Ethan typed back, still half asleep. What's that? The reply came almost immediately. I forgot to ask if Sophie has any food allergies. The planetarium has a cafe, and I was thinking we could grab lunch after the eclipse program. Unless that's too presumptuous. I can be presumptuous sometimes. My ex-husband used to say I plan things without consulting people first. He wasn't wrong. Ethan smiled despite himself. No allergies. And I don't think you're presumptuous. I think you're organized. There's a difference. That's kind of you to say. Most people just call me controlling. Are you? Probably, but only about things that matter. And lunch matters? There was a longer pause this time. Then, yeah, it does. Ethan sat up in bed, fully awake now, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. He started to type a response 3 different times, deleting each attempt before finally settling on, then lunch sounds perfect. Good. Now go make those pancakes you promised Sophie. I can practically hear her pacing downstairs from here. How did you know about the pancakes? Lucky guess. You seem like a pancake kind of dad. Ethan laughed out loud at that, startling himself with the sound. When was the last time he'd laughed alone in his bedroom at 7:45 in the morning? He couldn't remember. He found Sophie in the kitchen, already dressed in jeans and an oversized sweatshirt from a science camp she'd attended last summer. She'd gotten the coffee started but hadn't poured herself any, still operating under the household rule that 12 was too young for caffeine, despite her frequent arguments to the contrary. Morning, kiddo, Ethan said, ruffling her hair as he passed. Sophie ducked away from his hand with practiced ease, but she was smiling. So? How was it? How was what? Dad? The wedding. Don't play dumb. She hopped onto one of the kitchen counter stools, folding her arms on the granite surface. Mrs. Chen said you came home late and seemed happy. You never come home happy from work events. It wasn't a work event. Not really. Fine. Social obligation event. Same thing. She watched him pull ingredients from the refrigerator. Eggs, milk, butter, the good vanilla extract she'd bought him for his birthday because she'd read that it made a difference in baking. But you had fun? Ethan cracked eggs into a bowl, considering his answer. Sophie was perceptive enough that lying wouldn't work, but telling her everything felt premature. What was there to tell, really? That he'd met a woman? That they danced? That for a few hours he'd remembered what it felt like to be interested in something other than just getting through the day? I did have fun, he said finally. More than I expected to. Because of the wedding or because of something else? You're very nosy this morning. I'm very nosy every morning. You usually just don't notice because you're half asleep until your second cup of coffee. Sophie grinned, pleased with herself. So there was a something else. Or a someone else. Ethan whisked the eggs with more force than necessary, buying himself time. There was a person I talked to, our neighbor actually, Maya, from 3 houses down. Sophie's eyes lit up with the kind of delighted recognition that made Ethan immediately regret saying anything. The astronomy lady, with the dark hair who always wears those long scarves even in summer? I don't know about the scarves, but yes, she works at the planetarium. That's so cool. What did you guys talk about? Black holes, mostly. Sophie laughed. Of course you did. That's the most dad thing I've ever heard. You went to a wedding and talked about black holes. We also danced. The words came out before Ethan could stop them, and he watched Sophie's expression transform from amusement to something more complicated. Hope, maybe, mixed with caution. She'd learned over the past 5 years not to get too excited about things that might not last, had developed a protective instinct that no 12-year-old should need. You danced? She asked quietly. I did. She didn't really give me a choice. Good. Sophie's voice was firm. You needed someone to not give you a choice. You would have stood in a corner all night otherwise. Probably true. Ethan poured batter onto the heated griddle, watching it bubble and spread. Anyway, she invited us to the planetarium next Saturday. There's a program about lunar eclipses. I thought maybe you'd want to go. Us? Like me and you and her? If you're comfortable with that. Sophie was quiet for a moment, processing. Ethan kept his focus on the pancakes, giving her space to think without the pressure of his attention. He flipped them carefully, watching the golden brown surface reveal itself. Is it a date? Sophie asked finally. I think so. Yeah. Your first date since Mom. It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. Yes. Are you scared? The directness of it caught him off guard. He plated the first batch of pancakes, slid them across the counter to Sophie, and met her eyes. Terrified. But you're doing it anyway? I'm trying to. Sophie picked up her fork, cutting into the stack with surgical precision. She took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, then said, I think that's good. Mom would think it's good too. The statement landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through Ethan's carefully maintained composure. He gripped the edge of the counter, steadying himself against the wave of emotion that threatened to pull him under. You think so? His voice came out rougher than intended. Yeah, she wouldn't want you to be alone forever. She told me once that loving someone means wanting them to be happy, even if you're not there to see it. Sophie paused, looking down at her plate. I was really little when she said it. I think she was talking about Grandpa after Grandma died, but I remember it. Ethan moved around the counter and pulled Sophie into a hug, pressing his face into her hair. She smelled like the coconut shampoo she'd insisted on buying last month, and something else that was just uniquely her. A combination of laundry detergent and the vanilla lotion she'd started wearing in childhood itself, slipping away a little more each day. When did you get so wise? He asked. I've always been wise. You just finally noticed. But her voice was thick, and when she pulled back, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I just want you to be happy, Dad. That's all. You work so hard and you take care of me and you do everything right, but you're not happy. And I think maybe this Maya person could help with that. It's not her job to make me happy, kiddo. That's not how it works. I know, but maybe she could remind you that you're allowed to be. That's different. Ethan kissed the top of her head, blinking back his own tears. You're going to make an incredible adult someday. You know that? Obviously. Now finish making pancakes before I eat all of these myself. The rest of breakfast passed in easier conversation. Sophie told him about a group project at school, complained about a teacher who assigned homework over the weekend, and asked if they could finally get a dog now that she was old enough to take care of it herself. Ethan deflected the dog question the way he always did, promising to think about it while knowing he'd probably cave eventually. Sophie had inherited her mother's persistence, and when she wanted something badly enough, she usually found a way. After breakfast, Ethan cleaned up while Sophie disappeared to her room to video chat with friends. He could hear her laughter drifting down the hallway, bright and unguarded in a way that made him grateful all over again for whatever resilience she'd managed to maintain despite everything. His phone buzzed with another text from Maya. Question. Is it weird that I'm already planning the planetarium visit in my head? I have a whole route mapped out, Exhibits we should see. The best time to grab seats for the Eclipse program. I'm aware this makes me sound intense. Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter, smiling. Not weird. Thorough. You're very diplomatic. Has anyone ever told you that? It's the lawyer training. We're professionally diplomatic. Must be exhausting. Sometimes, but not right now. Good. Because I'm about to be undiplomatic and ask you something potentially invasive. Ethan's pulse quickened. Ask. How much have you told Sophie about me? About Saturday? I don't want to overstep or assume anything, but if we're doing this, whatever this is, I want to make sure she's okay with it. Kids get a vote. That's non-negotiable for me. The thoughtfulness of the question made something in Ethan's chest expand. He thought about all the ways this conversation could have gone, all the people who might have treated Sophie as an obstacle to work around rather than a person whose feelings mattered. I told her this morning about you, about the planetarium, about it being a date. She's okay with it. More than okay, actually. She told me Mom would approve. There was a long pause, then, that's a lot of trust she's putting in a stranger. She's a good judge of character. Better than I am, honestly. Still, I don't take that lightly. I know, that's why I said yes. Another pause, longer this time. Ethan wondered what Maya was thinking, if she was second-guessing this whole thing, if the reality of dating someone with a kid was hitting her in ways she hadn't anticipated. But when her response came, it was simple. Saturday can't come fast enough. The week that followed felt both impossibly long and startlingly short. Ethan went to work, took calls, reviewed contracts, and sat through meetings that blurred together into a monotonous haze of professional obligation. But underneath the routine, something had shifted. He found himself thinking about Saturday with the kind of anticipation he hadn't felt in years. Not dread, not anxiety, though there was plenty of that too, but genuine excitement about something that existed outside the narrow parameters of responsibility and survival. Maya texted throughout the week, never too much, never intrusive, but enough to establish a rhythm of contact that felt natural. She sent him articles about lunar eclipses and photos of the planetarium's new exhibits. She told him stories about the kids she taught, the 8-year-old who'd asked if black holes had feelings, the teenager who'd cried during a documentary about the Voyager missions, because the idea of something leaving the solar system forever was too sad to contemplate. Ethan told her about his work, though he tried to make it sound more interesting than it was. He sent her pictures of Sophie's science fair project, a model of the solar system made from painted foam balls and wire hangers. He told her about the time he and his wife had gone stargazing on their honeymoon in Montana, before light pollution and grief had made the sky feel distant and untouchable. Your wife sounds like she was wonderful, Maya texted after that particular story. She was. She really was. I'm not trying to replace her. I hope you know that. I know. You couldn't if you tried. You're different people. Different in a good way or different in a complicated way? Ethan stared at the message for a long time before responding. Both. Is that okay? More than okay. That's honest. I'll take honest over easy any day. By Friday night, Ethan was so wired with nerves that he couldn't focus on the brief he was supposed to be reviewing. Sophie found him at the kitchen table at 10 o'clock, his laptop open but the cursor blinking uselessly over the same paragraph he'd been trying to edit for 20 minutes. You should go to bed, she said, pouring herself a glass of water. You're not getting any work done anyway. That obvious? Dad, you've read the same sentence 4 times. I can see your screen from here. Ethan closed the laptop with a sigh. I'm nervous. About tomorrow? Why? You already know her. You've been texting all week. Texting is different. Texting is easy. Tomorrow is... He gestured vaguely, struggling to articulate the knot of feelings that had taken up residence in his chest. Tomorrow is real, and I don't know how to do real anymore. Sophie sat down across from him, her expression serious in a way that made her look older than 12. You do real every day. You do it with me. You do it at work. You're just scared because this real matters in a different way. When did you become a therapist? YouTube, mostly. And that book Mrs. Chen gave me about dealing with grief. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. Dad, it's okay to be scared, But you can't let scared stop you from trying. That's what you always tell me. Ethan looked down at their hands, his large and weathered, hers still small enough to remind him she wasn't actually as grown up as she sounded. You're right. You're absolutely right. I know. Now go to bed. You need to not look exhausted tomorrow. First impressions and all that. It's not a first impression. We already met. Fine. Second impressions. Those matter too. Ethan went to bed but didn't sleep much. He lay in the darkness, listening to the house settle around him, thinking about everything that could go wrong. What if the conversation didn't flow as easily in person? What if Sophie didn't actually like Maya once they spent real time together? What if he'd built this up in his head into something it could never be, and reality couldn't possibly measure up? But underneath the anxiety, there was something else, something that felt like hope. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect June day that felt like a gift. Ethan showered, changed clothes 3 times before settling on jeans and a button-down shirt that Sophie approved of, and tried not to check his phone every 5 minutes. Maya had texted at 8. Still on for 11? I'm bringing my A-game tour guide energy. Fair warning, I take this very seriously. We'll be there, Ethan replied. Should I be worried about how seriously? Only moderately. I promise not to quiz Sophie afterward. Unless she wants to be quizzed. Some kids love that. She's half nerves, half excitement. Pretty sure she changed outfits 4 times. Tell her I did too. Solidarity. They arrived at the planetarium at 10:50, parking in the visitor lot beneath a sign that proclaimed, "Explore the Universe." The building was modern and sprawling, all glass and steel, with a massive dome rising from the center like a geometric mountain. Sophie pressed her face against the car window, taking it all in with undisguised excitement. "This is so cool," she breathed. Ethan killed the engine, his hand slightly unsteady. "Ready? Are you?" "Getting there." They found Maya waiting near the entrance, leaning against the wall in dark jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was scrolling through her phone, but she looked up as they approached, and her whole face transformed when she smiled. "You made it," she said, pocketing her phone. "We did." Ethan's voice sounded more or less normal, which he considered a victory. "Maya, this is Sophie. Sophie, this is Maya." Sophie stepped forward with the kind of confidence Ethan had never possessed at her age. "Hi. Dad says you work here and know everything about space." Maya laughed. "Not everything, but a lot. Enough to be dangerous." She extended her hand and Sophie shook it with solemn formality. "Your dad also tells me you made a solar system for your science fair. That's impressive." "It was okay. I messed up the spacing between planets. But Mrs. Chen said accuracy matters less than effort." Mrs. Chen sounds wise. Though for the record, getting planetary spacing right is nearly impossible at model scale. The solar system is mostly empty space. If you made it accurate, you'd need a football field. Sophie's eyes widened. "Really? Really? Come on, I'll show you." Maya led them into the planetarium, past the ticket desk. She flashed her employee badge at the attendant, and into the main atrium. The space was vast and echoing, with exhibits arranged around the perimeter and the dome theater looming overhead. Families wandered between displays, kids running ahead while parents tried to keep up. The air smelled like popcorn from the cafe and something else, something metallic and clean, that Ethan associated with science museums. "So, here's the plan," Maya said, walking backward so she could face them both. "We've got about 40 minutes before the Eclipse program starts. I figured we'd hit a few exhibits first, nothing too intense, just the good stuff. Then we watch the show, grab lunch, and see where the afternoon takes us. Sound good?" "Sounds perfect," Ethan said. Sophie was already drifting toward a display about the Mars rovers, her attention completely captured. Maya watched her go with an expression of fond recognition. "She's going to fit right in here," she said quietly. "Kids who love space have a specific kind of energy. You can always tell." She got that from her mom, the curiosity, the excitement about learning. Ethan shoved his hands in his pockets, watching his daughter trace her fingers over the display case glass. "I'm more of a follow-the-instructions kind of person. She's a what if we tried something completely different person." "That's a good balance. You keep her grounded. She keeps you flexible." Or she gives me heart attacks trying things I'd never approve of if she asked permission first. Maya grinned. That too. They caught up to Sophie at the Mars exhibit, where she was reading every placard with intense focus. Maya pointed out details that weren't in the descriptions, stories about the engineers who built the rovers, the unexpected discoveries, the moment when Spirit got stuck in Martian sand and the team had to problem solve from 93 million miles away. That's what I love about space exploration, Maya said, gesturing at a photo of the Curiosity rover. It's not just about the science. It's about humans refusing to accept that some things are impossible. We sent machines to another planet. We drive them around with radio signals that take 20 minutes to arrive. That's insane. That's beautiful. Sophie looked up at her with something close to awe. Do you think people will live on Mars someday? I think people will try. Whether we should is a different question. What do you mean? Maya crouched down to Sophie's level, her expression thoughtful. Mars is hard. No air, no water, radiation, dust storms. Making it livable would take centuries and resources we might need here on Earth. So we have to ask ourselves, are we exploring Mars to learn and grow, or are we looking for an escape route because we've messed up our own planet? The answer matters. Sophie considered this seriously. Both, maybe? Maybe. Humans are complicated like that. They moved through the exhibits, Maya narrating with the easy expertise of someone who'd done this hundreds of times, but still loved it. She showed them a meteorite older than Earth, let Sophie touch a moon rock sample, explained why Pluto got demoted from planet status in terms that made the decision sound both logical and kind of heartbreaking. Ethan found himself watching Maya more than the exhibits. The way she talked with her hands, the way she listened to Sophie's questions with full attention, never condescending, never dismissive. The way she'd glance at him occasionally, checking in without words, making sure he was part of this and not just an observer. At one point, while Sophie was absorbed in a virtual reality simulation of the International Space Station, Maya stepped closer to Ethan, her shoulder brushing his. You're quiet, she said. Just watching, learning. Learning what? That you're really good at this. Teaching, I mean. You make complicated things feel accessible. That's the job. Break down the universe into bite-sized pieces people can actually digest. She paused, then added, You're good at this too, you know. At what? Being present, letting Sophie explore without hovering. Some parents can't let go enough to let their kids just exist in spaces like this. Ethan shrugged. She's more capable than I give her credit for most of the time. I'm trying to remember that. Well, you're doing better than trying. You're succeeding. The words settled warm in his chest, unfamiliar, but welcome. The Eclipse program started at 11:30 sharp. Maya led them into the domed theater, where rows of seats reclined back to face the curved ceiling. The lights dimmed as they settled in, Sophie between Ethan and Maya, practically vibrating with anticipation. This is my favorite program, Maya whispered as the show began. Just wait. The dome came alive with stars, so many stars that Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The narrator's voice filled the space, calm and resonant, explaining the mechanics of eclipses while the ceiling showed the moon sliding across the sun, turning day to twilight. Sophie gasped when the corona appeared, the sun's atmosphere visible only during totality, a halo of white fire around the moon's dark circle. It's so beautiful, she whispered. Maya leaned over. Want to know a secret? The corona is millions of degrees hotter than the sun's surface, and we still don't know why. Sometimes the universe keeps mysteries just to keep us humble. The program continued. Lunar eclipses, solar eclipses, the mathematics and mythology and pure accident of geometry that made them possible. Ethan felt himself get lost in it, the stress and anxiety of the week dissolving under the weight of cosmic perspective. When the lights came up 45 minutes later, Sophie turned to Maya with shining eyes. Can we come back? Like, a lot? Maya laughed, delighted. Anytime you want. I work here. I literally have the keys. They had lunch in the planetarium cafe, sharing a table by the windows overlooking a garden designed to look like a lunar landscape. Sophie talked nonstop about the program, asking questions faster than Maya could answer them, already planning what exhibits she wanted to see next time. Ethan let the conversation flow around him, content to watch these two people connect over something he only barely understood. At one point, Maya caught his eye across the table and smiled, a private, knowing smile that said she saw him, saw what this meant, and was glad to be part of it. After lunch, they wandered back through the exhibits. Sophie wanted to see everything, absorbing information like a sponge. Maya was patient, answering every question, offering details that sparked new questions. They lost track of time completely, 3 hours passing in what felt like minutes. Finally, reluctantly, Ethan checked his watch. "We should probably think about heading out. It's almost 4. "Already?" Sophie looked genuinely distressed. "Time moves weird when you're having fun," Maya said. "Einstein proved it." "Did he actually?" "Sort of. Time dilation is a real thing, though I don't think he specifically studied fun." They walked back to the parking lot together, the afternoon sun slanting golden through the trees. Sophie ran ahead slightly, giving them space, and Ethan wondered if that was intentional or just 12-year-old energy that couldn't be contained. "Thank you," he said to Maya. "For today, for everything. Sophie hasn't been this excited about anything in months." "She's a great kid. You're doing something right." "I'm stumbling through it mostly." "That's all any of us do." Maya stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Did today feel as good to you as it did to me?" Ethan's heart kicked up a notch. "Better, probably." "Good. Because I'd like to do it again. Not necessarily here, though Sophie has already extracted a promise for a return visit, but just this. Spending time together, the 3 of us or just the 2 of us. I'm flexible." "I'd like that too." "Yeah?" "Yeah." They stood there in the parking lot, the space between them charged with possibility. Ethan wanted to kiss her. The urge was sudden and overwhelming, but Sophie was right there, watching from the car, and it felt too soon, too public, too many things at once. Maya seemed to read his mind. "Not yet," she said softly, "but soon." "Soon," he agreed. She squeezed his hand once, briefly, then stepped back. "Text me when you get home, so I know you made it safely?" "You sound like a mom." "I sound like someone who cares. There's a difference." The drive home was quiet, Sophie exhausted and happy in the passenger seat. She fell asleep before they even hit the highway, her head resting against the window, a small smile still on her face. Ethan drove with one hand, the other resting on the gear shift, thinking about the day. About Maya's laugh and Sophie's excitement, and the strange, terrifying sensation of his life expanding beyond the narrow boundaries he'd constructed. When they got home, he helped Sophie inside, and she went straight to her room without argument, mumbling something about needing to research lunar geology before falling face first onto her bed. Ethan stood in the kitchen, the house quiet around him, and pulled out his phone. Home safe. Sophie is already asleep and probably dreaming about Mars rovers. Maya's response came quickly. "She's going to be an astronaut someday. I'm calling it now. I'll remind you of that prediction in 10 years. Please do. I'll be insufferably smug when I'm right." Ethan smiled, typing, "Today was perfect." "Thank you. It was perfect." "And Ethan?" "Yeah?" "I meant what I said. Soon." He knew what she meant, the kiss that hung in the air between them. The next step, whatever that looked like. The slow, terrifying, wonderful process of letting someone in. "Soon," he echoed. That night, lying in bed, Ethan thought about the eclipse program, about the moon sliding in front of the sun, 2 celestial bodies crossing paths in a dance that had been happening for billions of years, about shadow and light, and the way some things only became visible when other things moved out of the way. He'd been living in shadow for 5 years. Not darkness. There'd been Sophie, work, moments of brightness, but shadow. The safe, muted existence of someone afraid to step back into full sunlight because it might hurt too much. But Maya was sunlight, bright and warm and impossible to ignore. And for the first time since the accident, Ethan thought maybe he was ready to stop hiding. The weeks following the planetarium visit fell into a rhythm that felt both natural and entirely foreign to Ethan. Maya became a presence in their lives. Not intrusive, not overwhelming, but steady. She'd text in the mornings, sometimes just a photo of the sunrise with a caption about the Earth's rotation or atmospheric refraction. She'd call Sophie on Wednesday evenings to talk about whatever science question had captured her imagination that week. She'd show up at their door on Saturday afternoons with takeout from the Thai place she insisted made the best curry in the city, and they'd eat together on the back porch while Sophie told them about school drama, and Maya explained why stars twinkled but planets didn't. It was easy in a way Ethan hadn't expected anything to be easy again. But underneath the ease there was tension, the kind that built slowly, the kind that came from two people circling each other, waiting for the right moment to close the distance. They hadn't kissed yet, hadn't crossed that line from friendship into whatever came next. Every date, and there had been several now, some with Sophie and some without, ended with a hug that lasted just a fraction too long, hands lingering, eyes holding, both of them aware of what wasn't happening, but neither quite ready to make it happen. Until the night everything changed. It was a Tuesday in mid-July, unseasonably cool for summer, the kind of evening that made you want to sit outside and pretend fall wasn't still months away. Ethan had just gotten home from work, loosening his tie as he walked through the door, when he found Sophie in the kitchen looking uncharacteristically serious. "We need to talk," she said, in a tone that would have been funny coming from a 12-year-old if her expression hadn't been so grave. Ethan's stomach dropped. "What happened? Are you okay? Is it school?" "I'm fine. School's fine. This isn't about me." Sophie crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. "It's about you and Maya." "What about us?" "You're being ridiculous." Ethan blinked. "Excuse me?" "Dad, you like her. She likes you. You go on dates. You text constantly. You smile at your phone like a teenager, but you still haven't actually, made it official or whatever." Heat crept up Ethan's neck. "Sophie, that's not really—" "Yes, it is. Because I think you're waiting for permission. From me, or from Mom's memory, or from the universe. And I'm telling you right now, you have it. From me, at least. The other two you'll have to figure out yourself." Ethan sank into one of the kitchen chairs, suddenly exhausted. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because your mom—" His voice caught. Even after 5 years, even after therapy and time and all the supposed healing that was meant to happen, saying her name still felt like touching a live wire. Because your mom was everything, and being with someone else feels like saying she wasn't enough. Like I'm replacing her. Sophie moved around the table and sat down across from him, her expression softening. "Dad, you're not replacing her. You couldn't if you tried. Mom was Mom. Maya is Maya. They're completely different people. I know that. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're so scared of dishonoring Mom's memory that you're not letting yourself actually live." She reached across the table, taking his hand. "Mom died. That's awful and unfair, and I hate it every single day. But you didn't die, and you're not supposed to act like you did." Ethan stared at their joined hands, his vision blurring. "When did you get so wise?" "I've been telling you, I've always been wise. You just keep being surprised by it." Sophie squeezed his fingers. "Maya makes you happy. I can see it. And you deserve to be happy. You've spent 5 years making sure I was okay, putting me first, being the best dad you could possibly be. But I'm okay now. I'm more than okay. And I need you to be okay too. I'm trying. I know. But trying isn't enough anymore. You have to actually do it." She pulled her hand back, standing up. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go over to Maya's house right now, and you're going to tell her how you feel. Actually tell her, not dance around it or hint at it or wait for the perfect moment. Just be honest." Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. "Right now, it's 7 o'clock on a Tuesday. So, when's a better time? When you're both 80 and wondering what might have been." "Sophie, Dad." Her voice was gentle but firm. "Stop being scared, please." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with all the conversations they'd never quite had, all the grief they'd processed separately and together, all the ways they'd both been trying to move forward while looking backward. Ethan stood up slowly, his legs unsteady. "What if I mess it up?" "Then you mess it up. But at least you tried." Sophie smiled, and in that moment she looked so much like her mother that Ethan's breath caught. "Now go, before you talk yourself out of it." He went. The walk to Maya's house, 3 doors down, A distance he'd traveled countless times in the past few weeks felt impossibly long. Ethan's mind raced with everything he wanted to say and all the ways he could say it wrong. He'd argued cases in front of juries, negotiated million-dollar deals, stood his ground against opposing counsel who'd made careers out of intimidation. But this? This terrified him in ways nothing else had. Maya's house was a modest craftsman with a blue door and a garden that always seemed to be in some state of organized chaos. Herbs and flowers spilled over the borders of their beds. Wind chimes hung from the porch, and a telescope stood by the front window, like a silent sentinel. Ethan stood on the porch for a full 30 seconds before knocking. Maya answered almost immediately, like she'd been nearby. She was wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt that read, "My other car is a spaceship," her hair pulled up in a messy bun. No makeup. Completely, devastatingly beautiful. "Ethan?" Surprise colored her voice. "Is everything okay? We didn't have plans tonight, did we?" "No, I mean, yes. Everything's okay. And no, we didn't have plans." He shoved his hands in his pockets to keep them from shaking. "Can I come in?" "Of course." She stepped back, ushering him inside. Maya's living room was exactly what Ethan had expected. Bookshelves crammed with astronomy texts and science fiction novels, framed photographs of nebulae and galaxies on the walls, a comfortable couch buried under throw blankets. It smelled like jasmine tea and vanilla candles. "Do you want something to drink?" Maya asked, already moving toward the kitchen. "I just made tea, or I have wine if you— I need to tell you something." The words came out harder than he'd intended, stopping Maya mid-step. She turned slowly, her expression shifting from casual to concerned. "Okay," she said carefully. "That sounds serious." "It is. Maybe. I don't know." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "I'm not good at this. I used to be, but I'm not anymore, and I'm probably going to mess this up. But Sophie told me I had to actually try, instead of just thinking about trying. And she's right, so here I am." Maya sat down on the arm of her couch, watching him with those observant eyes that always seemed to see more than he meant to show. "Ethan, you're spiraling. Take a breath." He did. Then another. Then he forced himself to stop pacing and look at her directly. "I like you," he said. "More than like you. I think about you constantly. I look forward to your texts. I plan my days around the possibility of seeing you. When something good happens, you're the first person I want to tell. When something bad happens, you're the person I want to talk to until it doesn't hurt as much. And it terrifies me because I haven't felt this way since—" He stopped, the name catching in his throat the way it always did. "Since your wife," Maya finished gently. "Yes, and I keep waiting for the guilt to crush me, for it to feel like a betrayal. But it doesn't. It just feels like living. Actually living, not just surviving. And I don't know what to do with that." Maya was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she stood up and crossed the space between them in 3 strides. "Can I tell you something?" she asked, stopping just close enough that Ethan could see the flecks of gold in her eyes, could smell her shampoo, could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Please. I've been waiting for you to say something like this for weeks. Not because I need the validation or because I'm impatient, but because I could see you fighting yourself, fighting this. And it broke my heart a little bit every time we said goodnight, and I watched you pull back just when I thought you might finally let yourself move forward. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just tell me what you want, not what you think you should want, or what seems safe, or what won't hurt. Tell me what you actually want." The question hung between them, simple and impossible. Ethan thought about all the safe answers, all the ways he could hedge and qualify and keep one foot in the past while testing the waters of the future. But Sophie's words echoed in his head. Stop being scared. Just be honest. And he realized he was exhausted from protecting himself. "I want to kiss you," he said, his voice rough. "I've wanted to kiss you since the wedding. Maybe before that, if I'm being completely honest. And I want to see where this goes without sabotaging it because I'm scared of being happy. I want to introduce you to people as my girlfriend instead of my neighbor. I want Sophie to have someone else in her life who cares about her the way you already seem to. I want—" He stopped, overwhelmed by how much he wanted, by how long he'd been denying himself even the possibility of wanting. Maya reached up and cupped his face in her hands, her touch gentle but certain. Then stop talking and kiss me. So he did. It wasn't graceful. Ethan was out of practice, his movements clumsy with nerves and desperation and 5 years of pent-up loneliness. But Maya met him halfway, her hands sliding from his face to his shoulders to the back of his neck, pulling him closer. She tasted like jasmine tea and something sweet he couldn't name. She made a soft sound when he deepened the kiss, and it broke something open in his chest, something that had been locked tight for so long he'd forgotten it was there. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Maya rested her forehead against his. That was worth the wait, she said, a smile in her voice. Yeah, definitely. She pulled back slightly to look at him. Though if you make me wait that long again, I'm going to be significantly less patient. Noted. Ethan laughed, giddy with relief and adrenaline and the sheer impossibility of this moment existing at all. So what now? Now you tell me this is what you want. No qualifications, no backtracking. Just yes or no. Yes. Absolutely yes. Good. Maya kissed him again, softer this time, less urgent but no less meaningful. Then we figure it out as we go. Together. They moved to the couch, Maya curling into his side like she'd done it 1,000 times before. They talked for hours, about fears and hopes and all the messy, complicated feelings that came with starting over. Maya told him about her marriage, about the slow erosion of intimacy until they were more roommates than partners, about the relief and shame that came with finally admitting defeat. Ethan told her about the first year after the accident, about the weight of grief that made getting out of bed feel like climbing a mountain, about Sophie's strength and how it had both saved him and made him feel guilty for needing saving. Can I ask you something? Maya said eventually, her head resting on his shoulder. Anything. What would your wife think about this? About us? Ethan had been expecting the question, had been asking it himself for weeks, but hearing it out loud still hit differently. He thought about Sarah, about the way she'd laugh at his terrible jokes and call him out when he was being stubborn, about the morning she'd left for that work event, kissing him goodbye and telling him not to wait up because she'd be late, about the last thing she'd said, I love you, even when you're annoying. I think, he said slowly, choosing his words with care, she'd be happy I found someone who challenges me, who doesn't let me hide. She hated when I withdrew into myself. It was our biggest fight point. She'd tell me I was being too cautious, too afraid of messing up to actually try things. He paused, emotion tightening his throat. And I think she'd love that Sophie has another adult in her life who cares about her. Sarah always said it takes a village, that no kid should have just one person looking out for them. But, Maya prompted gently, but it still feels strange, like I'm living in a future she was supposed to be part of, and I don't know how to reconcile that. Maya shifted to look at him. You don't have to reconcile it. You just have to let it exist. The grief and the joy, the past and the present. They don't cancel each other out. They coexist. How are you so wise about this? I'm not. I'm just further along in accepting that life doesn't wait for us to be ready. It just keeps happening, and we can either participate or watch from the sidelines. She took his hand, threading their fingers together. I spent a year on the sidelines after my divorce, just going through the motions, telling myself I was fine when I was really just numb. And then I saw you at that wedding, standing alone by that pillar, looking like you were carrying the weight of the world, and something in me just woke up. I wanted to know you. I wanted to shake you out of whatever prison you'd built for yourself. I wanted to save me? Ethan asked, keeping his tone light but needing to know the answer. No. I wanted to remind you that you were worth saving yourself. Maya squeezed his hand. There's a difference. I can't fix your grief or erase your past, but I can stand next to you while you figure out how to carry it. If you'll let me. I'll let you, Ethan said. I want to let you. They stayed like that until nearly midnight, talking and kissing and simply existing in the same space without the weight of uncertainty between them. At some point, Maya made more tea, and they moved to her back porch, where the telescope stood pointed at the sky. Want to see Jupiter? She asked, adjusting the lens. At midnight on a Tuesday? Absolutely. Maya laughed, that full-body laugh he'd come to love, and positioned the telescope. "Look through here." Ethan did. The planet appeared in startling detail, bands of color, the suggestion of the Great Red Spot, and 4 tiny points of light arranged in a line. "Those are the Galilean moons," Maya explained, standing close enough that her breath warmed his ear. "Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. Galileo discovered them in 1610 with a telescope way less powerful than this one. It was one of the first pieces of evidence that not everything in the universe revolves around Earth." Humbling. "That's astronomy for you. We're not the center of anything, just one planet around one star in one galaxy among billions. But somehow we're here anyway, looking up, trying to understand it all." She rested her chin on his shoulder. "I find that comforting. We're insignificant in the cosmic sense, but that means our problems are too. The universe doesn't care about our heartbreaks or our mistakes. It just keeps expanding." That's either very comforting or very depressing. Both, like most true things. Ethan stepped back from the telescope and pulled Maya into his arms, holding her close. The night air was cool against his skin, the stars bright overhead, and for the first time in 5 years he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. "I should get home," he said eventually, reluctantly. "Sophie's probably still awake, waiting to interrogate me." "She's a good kid. You're lucky." "I know." Ethan kissed Maya's forehead. "Thank you, for tonight, for everything. You don't have to thank me for this. We're doing it together, remember? Together." I like the sound of that. Maya walked him to the door, and they stood on her porch for another 10 minutes, stealing more kisses, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Finally, Ethan forced himself to step back. "Dinner tomorrow?" he asked. "The 3 of us? We could actually tell Sophie officially, make it real." "It's already real. But yes, dinner sounds perfect." The walk home felt different than the walk over. Lighter, easier, like something that had been pressing down on Ethan's chest for years had finally lifted enough to let him breathe fully. Sophie was waiting in the living room when he came in, supposedly reading a book, but clearly just pretending while she waited. "So?" she asked the moment he closed the door. Ethan couldn't help smiling. "So we're together. Officially." Sophie pumped her fist in the air. "Finally! I thought I was going to have to intervene again." "You sent me over there. That was intervention enough." "True. I'm pretty proud of that." She set her book aside, studying him. "You look different." "Different how?" "Happy. Actually happy. Not just, I'm pretending everything is fine, happy." She stood up and hugged him, fierce and tight. "I'm glad, Dad. Really glad." Ethan held his daughter, marveling at how much she'd grown, how much strength she carried in her small frame. "Me too, kiddo. Me too." That night, lying in bed, Ethan thought about the wedding reception where this had all started, about Maya's voice cutting through the noise, demanding that he look at her instead of at ghosts, about how terrified he'd been of this exact moment, the moment where he admitted that life could still hold joy even after devastating loss. He thought about Sarah too, about their life together and the future they'd planned that would never happen. The guilt was still there, familiar and sharp, but it was different now. Not overwhelming, not paralyzing. Just a part of the landscape of his grief, something he could acknowledge and carry without letting it define every choice. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Thank you for being brave enough to show up tonight. I know it wasn't easy." Ethan typed back, "Thank you for being worth showing up for." Cheesy. I love it. I'm out of practice with romance. You'll have to be patient. I've got time. Lots of time. The promise in those words made Ethan's chest ache in the best possible way. Over the next few weeks, they settled into a new rhythm. Maya came to dinner more often, helping Sophie with homework and arguing good-naturedly with Ethan about everything from politics to whether pineapple belonged on pizza. They went on actual dates, movies and restaurants, and a minor league baseball game where Maya proved to have surprisingly strong opinions about the designated hitter rule. They had their first fight, a small thing about scheduling that blew up because they were both exhausted, and learned how to apologize and mean it. Sophie thrived with Maya's attention, soaking up the astronomy lessons and the easy affection that Maya offered without expecting anything in return. More than once, Ethan came home to find them on the back porch with the telescope, Maya explaining stellar evolution while Sophie took notes like she was preparing for an exam. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when Ethan would catch himself comparing Maya to Sarah, would feel the familiar pang of loss when he realized Sarah would never meet Sophie's middle school teachers, or see her graduate, or be part of any of the milestones still to come. There were moments when Maya would pull back slightly, afraid of overstepping, uncertain of her place in this makeshift family they were building, but they talked through it. They learned each other's boundaries and triggers. They gave each other space when needed and showed up when it mattered. And slowly, carefully, Ethan allowed himself to believe that maybe this could work, that maybe he could honor his past while building a future, that maybe love didn't require forgetting, it just required being brave enough to try again. One Saturday afternoon in early August, 3 months after the wedding that had changed everything, Maya suggested they go back to the hotel where it all started. There was an outdoor concert in the gardens, something classical and free to the public. "Is that weird?" she asked. "Going back to where we met?" Ethan considered it. "No, I think it's perfect." They brought Sophie, who was delighted by the prospect of an outdoor concert, even if she didn't particularly care about classical music. The hotel gardens were transformed with string lights and a small stage, families spread across blankets on the grass. They found a spot near the back, laid out the blanket Maya had brought, and settled in as the musicians began tuning their instruments. Sophie immediately pulled out her phone to text friends, leaving Ethan and Maya in their own bubble. "I stood right there," Ethan said, pointing to the marble pillar visible through the garden entrance. "That's where I was when you first saw me." Radiating misery and trying to blend into the architecture. Very memorable. "And you decided that was the perfect person to approach?" "I decided that was someone who needed approaching. There's a difference." Maya leaned against his shoulder. "Best decision I ever made." "Even when I was being difficult?" "Especially then. Easy isn't always better." The concert started, the music drifting across the gardens like a physical presence. Ethan found Maya's hand and held it, no longer worried about who might see or what it might mean. This was his life now, not the life he'd planned, not the life he'd lost, but the life he was actively choosing to build. Sophie glanced up from her phone, saw their joined hands, and smiled before going back to her texting. Such a small thing, that smile. Such enormous permission. As the sun set and the music swelled and Maya's head rested on his shoulder, Ethan thought about the moment that had started all of this. The moment when Maya had looked at him across a crowded dance floor and demanded something he'd forgotten how to give. "Stop staring at the bride. Look at me." He was looking now. Finally, fully looking. And what he saw was beautiful. The concert ended with applause that rippled through the gardens like a wave, and they packed up their blanket as families around them began filtering toward the parking lot. Sophie walked ahead, earbuds in, lost in whatever playlist currently dominated her attention. The evening air had cooled to something pleasant, carrying the scent of roses from the hotel's elaborate garden beds. Maya stopped walking suddenly, her hand still in Ethan's, and turned to look back at the building. The ballroom where the wedding had been held glowed with warm light from the windows, another event clearly underway inside. "Do you ever think about how random it all was?" she asked. "That wedding invitation you almost didn't accept. Me deciding to go even though I barely knew the couple. Both of us ending up in that room at that exact moment." "All the time," Ethan admitted. "Sometimes it feels like the universe conspired to put us in the same place. Or maybe we were just finally ready to see what was in front of us." Maya squeezed his hand. "I'd passed your house 1,000 times before that night, waved at you in the driveway. We existed in the same space for years and never really connected. And then suddenly we did. You make it sound inevitable. Maybe it was. Or maybe we made it inevitable by choosing to show up." She smiled, pulling him forward to catch up with Sophie. "Either way, I'm glad we did." The following weeks brought a new kind of normal that felt both foreign and increasingly comfortable. Maya had her own key to Ethan's house now, would let herself in on mornings when she had early shifts at the planetarium, and wanted to steal a cup of his coffee, which she insisted was better than hers, even though they used the same beans. Ethan kept a drawer at her place filled with the basics: a toothbrush, a change of clothes, the book he was perpetually halfway through reading. They hadn't talked about the future in concrete terms, hadn't made plans beyond the next few weeks. But the relationship had weight now, substance. It was real in a way that demanded acknowledgement from the people around them. Which was why, on a humid Saturday in late August, Ethan found himself sitting in Maya's living room, watching her pace nervously while she prepared to make a phone call. "You don't have to do this today," he said gently. "We can wait." "No, I need to do it now, before I lose my nerve." Maya stared at her phone like it might bite her. "My parents have been asking why I sound so happy lately. They're going to know something's up if I keep deflecting." "And you're worried they won't approve?" "I'm worried they'll have opinions, loud ones." She sat down next to him, her knee bouncing with nervous energy. "They weren't exactly supportive during the divorce, lots of marriages work, and you didn't try hard enough speeches. If I tell them I'm dating someone with a kid, someone who's been widowed, they're going to have thoughts about complexity and baggage and whether I'm setting myself up for heartbreak." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Am I? Setting you up for heartbreak?" Maya's expression softened immediately. She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "No, but my parents don't know you. They don't know us. They just know their version of how relationships should work, and we don't fit that mold." "Do you care? If we don't fit their mold?" "I care about them having opinions. I don't care about following them." She kissed him quickly, then pulled back. "Okay, I'm doing this." She dialed before she could second-guess herself, putting the phone on speaker. It rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered, bright and slightly breathless. "Maya, I was just thinking about you. How are you, sweetheart?" "Hi, Mom. I'm good. Really good, actually." Maya glanced at Ethan, drawing strength from his presence. "I wanted to call because I have some news." "News? What kind of news?" Her mother's tone shifted slightly, cautious in that way parents got when they sensed something unexpected coming. "I'm seeing someone. Dating someone. It's been a few months now, and it's serious, and I wanted you and Dad to know." There was a pause, the kind that stretched just a fraction too long. Then, "That's wonderful, honey. Tell me about him. Or her. I don't want to assume." "Him. His name is Ethan. He's a lawyer, corporate law, mergers and acquisitions. He's kind and thoughtful, and he makes me laugh. And he has a 12-year-old daughter named Sophie who's basically a genius in training." Another pause, heavier this time. "A daughter, so he's been married before?" "He's a widower. His wife died 5 years ago." "Oh." The single syllable carried volumes of meaning, sympathy and concern, and the beginning of those opinions Maya had predicted. "That's a lot, sweetheart. For both of you. Are you sure you're ready for that kind of complexity? Dating someone with a child is very different from, Mom, I know what I'm doing." Maya's voice was firm but not unkind. "I'm not going into this blindly. Ethan and I have talked about everything. His past, Sophie, what this relationship means, where it might go. I'm not trying to replace anyone or fix anyone. I'm just choosing to be with someone who makes me happy." "Of course you are. I just worry. After the divorce, you were so hurt. I don't want to see you get hurt again." "Life doesn't come with guarantees, Mom. You know that. Every relationship is a risk, but this one feels worth it." Ethan reached over and took Maya's free hand, anchoring her. She smiled at him, grateful. Her mother sighed, the sound crackling through the phone speaker. "When do we get to meet him? And his daughter?" "Soon. Maybe next month? I wanted to tell you first, make sure you had time to adjust to the idea before we did the whole family dinner thing." "Adjust to the idea," her mother repeated, a hint of amusement creeping into her voice. "You make it sound like I'm going to need therapy to process this." "You might. You did spend 6 months after my divorce trying to set me up with your book club friend's son." Marcus was a very nice young man. Marcus talked about his car for 45 minutes straight and called his mother 3 times during dinner. Ethan bit back a laugh, and Maya shot him a warning look even as her own lips twitched with amusement. "Well," her mother said, "Ethan already sounds like an improvement over Marcus. And if he makes you happy, truly happy, then I'm happy for you. Your father will want to meet him, of course. Probably subject him to questions about his intentions and his retirement portfolio. I wouldn't expect anything less. They talked for a few more minutes, Maya's mother extracting promises about future visits and warning her not to rush into anything too serious too fast, even though they both knew Maya had never done anything slowly in her life. When the call ended, Maya slumped back against the couch, exhaling loudly. Well, that happened. That wasn't so bad, Ethan offered. That was the easy part. My dad's going to be worse. He's convinced every man I date is secretly terrible and just hiding it well. She turned to look at Ethan. Fair warning. He's going to grill you about everything from your credit score to your views on gun control. I can handle it. Can you? Because he made my ex-husband cry once. Granted, my ex-husband was kind of a wimp, but still. Maya. Ethan pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. I'm not afraid of your parents. I'm not afraid of hard questions. The only thing I'm afraid of is messing this up. You're not going to mess this up. You don't know that. I know you. That's enough. They stayed like that for a while, wrapped up in each other, the late afternoon sun slanting through the windows in golden bars. Eventually, Maya's phone buzzed with a text. Her mother, sending a message that just read, "He better be worth it," followed by 3 heart emojis. She's warming up to the idea already, Maya said, showing Ethan the screen. Or she's threatening me. Probably both. The conversation with Maya's parents shifted something in their relationship, made it more real, more visible to the outside world. They stopped hiding in the comfortable bubble they'd created and started integrating their lives more fully. Maya came to Sophie's school science fair and cheered louder than anyone when Sophie's project on photosynthesis won second place. Ethan attended a fundraiser gala for the planetarium, uncomfortable in a tuxedo but proud to stand next to Maya as she networked with donors and talked about expanding the education programs. But the biggest shift came in September, when Ethan's sister Rachel announced she was coming to visit. Rachel was 2 years older than Ethan, a high school English teacher in Boston with strong opinions about everything and a protective streak that bordered on aggressive. She'd been his lifeline after Sarah died, had flown in every other weekend for 6 months to help with Sophie and make sure Ethan was actually eating and sleeping and not just drowning in grief. She'd earned the right to have opinions about his life, which meant telling her about Maya felt like a test Ethan wasn't sure he was ready to take. You have to tell her, Sophie said, finding him staring at his phone on a Tuesday evening, Rachel's text about her upcoming visit still unanswered. She's going to figure it out the second she gets here anyway. Aunt Rachel notices everything. I know, I'm just trying to find the right words. How about I'm dating someone and I'm happy? Those seem like good words. It's more complicated than that. It's only complicated because you're making it complicated. Sophie grabbed his phone before he could stop her and started typing. There. Sent. Sophie! Ethan lunged for the phone, but it was too late. He read the message she'd sent. Hey, Rach, I'm dating someone. Her name is Maya. She's amazing. You'll love her. See you next week. You're 12. You're not supposed to be this manipulative. I prefer to think of it as helpful. Sophie grinned, completely unrepentant. Besides, now you can't chicken out. The phone rang almost immediately. Ethan glared at Sophie, who shrugged and disappeared toward her room, leaving him to face the music alone. Ethan Walker! Rachel's voice came through the speaker, warm and delighted, and tinged with the kind of big sister authority that never quite went away no matter how old you got. You're dating someone? Since when? And why am I just finding out now? Since July, technically, and you're finding out now because I'm telling you now. July, it's September, Ethan. That's 2 months of keeping secrets. I wasn't keeping secrets. I was just waiting for the right time. Uh-huh. Tell me about her. Everything. Now. So Ethan did. He told Rachel about the wedding, about Maya's bold demand that he look at her instead of the bride, about the planetarium date and the weeks of circling each other before he finally worked up the courage to actually kiss her. He told her about Sophie's approval, about how Maya fit into their lives without trying to force anything. He told her about the fears and the guilt and the slow, careful process of learning to be happy again. Rachel listened without interrupting, which was unusual enough that Ethan knew she was taking this seriously. How does Sophie feel about all this? She asked when he finished. Really feel, not just what she's telling you to make you happy. She loves Maya. They're like kindred spirits, both of them obsessed with science, Both of them way smarter than I am. Ethan paused, choosing his next words carefully. I was worried at first that she was just excited about the idea of me dating, that the reality would be different. But she genuinely likes spending time with Maya. They have inside jokes now. It's good, Rachel finished. I can hear it in your voice. You sound different. Different how? Lighter, like you're not carrying quite as much weight. Her voice softened. I'm happy for you, little brother, truly. Sarah would be too. The words hit harder than Ethan expected, emotion closing his throat. You think so? I know so. Sarah loved you, but she was also practical as hell. She wouldn't want you spending the rest of your life alone, wearing her memory like a hair shirt. Rachel paused. Though I reserve the right to thoroughly interrogate this Maya person when I visit. Make sure she's good enough for my baby brother. I'm 42, Rach. And I'm 44, which means I still get to be overprotective. It's in the sister contract. She laughed, and Ethan felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. I'm proud of you. I know this wasn't easy. It wasn't. It's still not some days, but it's worth it. The best things usually are. Rachel's visit loomed large in Ethan's mind over the next week. He cleaned the house obsessively, drove Sophie crazy with his nervousness, and changed the dinner menu 3 times before Maya finally intervened. Ethan. She caught his hands as he was rearranging the living room furniture for the second time. Your sister is coming to see you and Sophie, not to judge your interior decorating skills. Relax. I can't relax. Rachel has opinions, strong ones. What if she doesn't like you? Then she doesn't like me, but I'm pretty likable, so I'm not too worried. Maya guided him to the couch and pushed him down gently. Sit. Breathe. Tell me what you're really afraid of. Ethan ran his hands through his hair, searching for the truth under the anxiety. I'm afraid she'll think I'm moving on too fast, that I'm disrespecting Sarah's memory. Rachel and Sarah were close. They talked every week, had their own friendship separate from me. If Rachel thinks I'm betraying that, then you'll talk about it, like adults. And you'll remind her that loving someone new doesn't erase loving someone who died. Maya sat next to him, her hand finding his. But I don't think that's going to happen. From everything you've told me about Rachel, she sounds like someone who wants you to be happy, even if it's complicated. Especially if it's complicated. She never trusted simple. Smart woman. Rachel arrived on a Friday afternoon, pulling up in a rental car and emerging with the kind of energy that made her seem taller than her actual 5'6" frame. She had the same dark hair as Ethan, though hers was streaked with gray she refused to dye, and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. Sophie ran out to meet her, launching herself into a hug that nearly knocked Rachel off balance. They'd always been close. Rachel was the cool aunt who sent books and remembered every interest Sophie mentioned in passing. Look at you, Rachel said, holding Sophie at arm's length. When did you get so tall? You're going to be taller than your dad by next year. Probably. He's kind of short for a man. I'm 5'11", Ethan protested, coming down the porch steps. That's perfectly average. Keep telling yourself that, little brother. Rachel pulled him into a hug that smelled like the lavender soap she'd been using since college. You look good. Really good. Thanks. You look tired. It's called having a real job. You should try it sometime. They fell into familiar banter, the kind that came from decades of sibling relationships, and the comfort of knowing you could say almost anything without breaking the bond. Sophie helped Rachel bring her bags inside while Ethan started dinner, pasta with homemade sauce, garlic bread, the safe comfort food that Rachel had been requesting since they were kids. Maya was coming over at 7, giving Rachel time to settle in and giving Ethan time to work himself into a state of nervous energy that Sophie eventually had to intervene on. Dad, you're stirring that sauce like you're trying to murder it, she said, gently taking the spoon from his hand. Go talk to Aunt Rachel. I'll handle this. Since when do you cook? Since you taught me? Also, YouTube. Now go. He found Rachel in the living room looking at the photos on the mantle. She'd picked up the one from Sophie's 10th birthday. Sarah front and center, laughing at something off camera, Ethan's arm around her waist. I miss her, Rachel said quietly, not turning around. Every day I think about calling her to tell her something, and then I remember. It's been 5 years and I still reach for the phone. I know, Ethan said. Me too. Rachel set the photo down carefully and turned to face him. So tell me about Maya, the real version, not the sanitized phone call version. Ethan sat down, gathering his thoughts. She's different from Sarah. Not better or worse, just different. She's more direct, more willing to push back when I'm being stubborn. She's patient with Sophie, but doesn't try to be her mother. She has her own life, her own passions, and she's not looking to me to complete her or fix her. We're just choosing to build something together. Do you love her? The question was so direct it took Ethan's breath away. He wanted to deflect, to say it was too soon or too complicated or any of the dozen excuses he'd been telling himself. But this was Rachel, who'd seen him at his absolute worst and loved him anyway. Yeah, he said, I do. Not the same way I loved Sarah. I don't think I could love anyone the same way I loved her. But I love Maya. And that doesn't make me love Sarah less. It just means I have more love than I thought I did. Rachel's eyes were bright with unshed tears. That's a good answer, the right answer. She crossed the room and hugged him tight. I'm glad. Truly. And I can't wait to meet the woman who managed to crack through that wall you built. When Maya arrived at 7, punctual as always, Ethan opened the door to find her holding a bottle of wine and looking only slightly less nervous than he felt. Hi, she said. I brought wine. And backup wine in the car, in case the first bottle doesn't adequately communicate that I'm trying very hard to make a good impression. Ethan kissed her quickly, then ushered her inside. You're going to be fine. You don't know that. I know Rachel, trust me. Rachel was waiting in the living room, and Ethan watched as the two most important women in his current life sized each other up. It lasted maybe 3 seconds before Rachel smiled and extended her hand. You must be Maya. I'm Rachel, the overprotective older sister who's about to ask you inappropriate questions over dinner. Maya shook her hand firmly. And I'm Maya, the astronomy nerd who's dating your brother and trying not to mess it up. Nice to meet you. Astronomy, huh? That's way cooler than what my ex-husband did. He sold insurance. Insurance is important. So is having a personality. He lacked one. Rachel took the wine bottle from Maya and examined the label approvingly. Good choice. Come on, let's get this open before Sophie burns the pasta. I heard that, Sophie called from the kitchen, and I'm not burning anything. Dinner was easier than Ethan had dared hope. Rachel asked questions, lots of them, but they were curious rather than interrogating. She wanted to know about the planetarium, about Maya's divorce, about how she and Ethan had actually met. Maya answered honestly, not trying to sugarcoat or impress, just being herself. Sophie dominated much of the conversation, telling Rachel about the Eclipse program and the exhibits, and Maya's promise to get her into the planetarium's summer internship program when she was old enough. An internship at 14? Rachel raised an eyebrow. That's ambitious. Sophie's exceptional, Maya said simply. The program usually takes high school juniors and seniors, but I think we can make an exception, especially if she keeps up this level of enthusiasm and knowledge. Sophie beamed, and Ethan felt his heart swell with gratitude for this woman who saw his daughter's potential and wanted to nurture it. After dinner, Sophie excused herself to video chat with friends, leaving the 3 adults on the back porch with coffee and the remains of the wine. The evening had cooled to something pleasant, crickets providing background music. Okay, Rachel said, setting down her coffee cup. I'm going to be direct because that's who I am. Maya, what are your intentions with my brother? Rachel, Ethan started, but Maya put a hand on his arm. It's okay. It's a fair question. She turned to Rachel. Honestly, I don't know what the future looks like. We haven't talked about moving in together or marriage or any of the big milestone things. What I do know is that I care about Ethan deeply. I care about Sophie, and I'm committed to showing up, even when it's hard, even when grief and history and all the complicated stuff makes it difficult. I'm not here to replace anyone or fix anyone. I'm just here because this, she gestured between herself and Ethan, feels right, and I want to see where right takes us. Rachel studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good answer. Though for the record, if you hurt him, I know people. That's fair. If he hurts me, I have access to a planetarium full of sharp equipment. Rachel laughed, surprised and delighted. Okay, I like you. Against my better instincts, but I like you. I'll take it. The weekend passed in a blur of activity. They took Rachel to the planetarium, showed her around the city, had breakfast at the diner where Ethan and Maya had gone on their first solo date. Rachel and Maya discovered a shared love of terrible reality TV shows, much to Ethan's dismay, and spent an entire evening hate-watching a dating show while providing running commentary. On Sunday afternoon, as Rachel was packing to leave, she pulled Ethan aside. "You're different," she said. She, in all the best ways, less haunted, more present. Maya did that. And Sophie, I guess? They reminded me that life doesn't stop just because you want it to. It's more than that. You're letting yourself be happy. Actually happy, not just going through the motions. Rachel zipped up her suitcase, then turned to face him fully. Sarah would approve. Of Maya, of you moving forward, all of it. You know that, right? I'm starting to. Good, because you deserve this. You both do. You and Sophie. You've done the hard work of surviving. Now you get to do the equally hard work of living. She hugged him tight. Don't screw this up. I'll do my best. That's all any of us can do. After Rachel left, Ethan found Maya in the kitchen, helping Sophie clean up from lunch. They were laughing about something, Maya's hand on Sophie's shoulder, in a gesture that was becoming increasingly familiar. Something about the scene made Ethan's chest ache in the best possible way. This was his life now. Not the life he'd planned, not the life he'd expected, but the life he was actively building with people who chose to be in it. Maya looked up and caught him staring. You okay? Yeah, he said, meaning it completely. I really am. That night, after Sophie had gone to bed, and Maya had returned to her own house, Ethan stood in his bedroom and pulled out the drawer where he kept Sarah's wedding ring. He'd been carrying it with him for 5 years, unable to let go but unsure what to do with it. He held it up to the light, watching it catch and refract, thinking about the woman who'd worn it and the life they'd built together. The grief was still there, probably always would be, but it felt different now. Less like drowning and more like remembering. Less like an ending and more like a chapter that closed so another could begin. Ethan put the ring back in the drawer, but this time he didn't close it with the finality he'd used before. He left it slightly ajar, a small acknowledgement that the past and present could coexist without destroying each other. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Rachel texted me. She said, and I quote, "You're good for him? Don't mess it up." Ethan smiled, typing back, "What did you say?" I said I'd do my best. Same thing you told her, apparently. We're very predictable, or very honest. Both. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a school day, and Sophie will need you functional. Good night, Maya. Good night, Ethan. Sweet dreams. He set his phone aside and lay down in the darkness, feeling the weight of the day settle around him. Rachel's approval, Maya's steadiness, Sophie's happiness. They were all pieces of something larger. Something that looked suspiciously like a future worth having. For the first time in 5 years, Ethan let himself imagine what that future might hold. Not in concrete terms, not with specific plans or timelines, but in feelings and possibilities. More mornings with coffee and easy conversation. More evenings on the porch watching stars. More moments of connection that reminded him why being alive was worth the effort. The grief would always be there. The memory of Sarah would always be part of him. But maybe, finally, that was okay. Maybe love didn't require choosing between past and present. Maybe it just required being brave enough to hold both and keep moving forward anyway. Outside, the night was quiet except for the usual suburban sounds, distant traffic, a dog barking, the wind moving through trees. Somewhere 3 doors down, Maya was probably still awake, reading or planning lessons or doing whatever it was she did in the hours before sleep. And in the room down the hall, Sophie was dreaming about stars and internships and a future that suddenly seemed full of promise. Ethan closed his eyes and let himself rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys, and knowing that he was finally, truly ready to meet them. The months that followed Rachel's visit settled into something that felt less like a new relationship and more like a life that had always been meant to exist this way. October brought cooler temperatures and the kind of golden light that made everything look softer around the edges. Maya started keeping a toothbrush at Ethan's house without discussing it first, and he found he didn't mind the presumption. In fact, he liked coming home to find her car in the driveway, liked the way the house felt more alive when she was in it. But life, as it tended to do, had other plans beyond the comfortable rhythm they'd established. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon in late October. Ethan was in his office reviewing a contract that should have been straightforward, but had somehow ballooned into 47 pages of unnecessarily complicated language when his cell phone rang. Maya's name lit up the screen. "Hey," he answered, grateful for the interruption. "What's up? Are you sitting down?" Her voice was strange, not upset exactly, but charged with something Ethan couldn't quite identify. His stomach dropped. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Everyone's fine. But I need to tell you something, and I need you to not freak out until I finish explaining." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "You're really not selling this well." "I got offered a job." The words came out in a rush. "In California, running the education department at the Griffith Observatory. It's a huge opportunity. Bigger budget, more staff, programs that reach millions of people instead of thousands. They called me this morning. They want an answer by the end of the week." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Ethan heard the words, understood them individually, but couldn't quite make them form a coherent picture. California. 3,000 miles away. An opportunity that would take Maya out of his life as suddenly as she'd entered it. "Ethan, say something." Don't know what to say." His voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. "California is far." "I know." "And you're considering it?" There was a pause, heavy with unspoken things. "I have to consider it. This is the kind of job people spend their entire careers hoping for. If I say no without at least thinking it through, I'll always wonder what I passed up." "Right, of course, that makes sense." Ethan rubbed his eyes, trying to organize his thoughts into something coherent. "When do they need you to start?" "January, if I take it." Another pause. "I haven't said yes. I wanted to talk to you first. Don't make this decision based on me. That's not fair to you." "Ethan, we've been together for 6 months. You're part of my life. Sophie's part of my life. Of course you factor into this decision. But you want it. I can hear it in your voice. You want this job." Maya was quiet for so long that Ethan thought the call might have dropped. Then quietly, "Yeah, I do. And I hate that I do, because it means choosing between something I've worked toward my whole career and something I've built with you that feels just as important." "Can I call you back?" Ethan asked. "I need to think." "Of course. Take your time." But time wasn't something Ethan had much of. The rest of the workday passed in a blur of distraction and half-finished tasks. He drove home on autopilot, his mind spinning through possibilities and outcomes. Long distance could work. People did it all the time. Or he could move to California, uproot Sophie from the only home she'd known, leave behind his job and the life they'd carefully rebuilt. Or Maya could stay, give up the opportunity, and potentially resent him for it years down the line. None of the options felt right. All of them felt impossible. Sophie was waiting when he got home, sitting at the kitchen table with homework spread out in front of her, but clearly not doing any of it. She looked up when he entered, her expression careful. "Maya called me," she said without preamble. "She told me about California." Ethan set his briefcase down slowly. "She did?" "She said she didn't want me to be blindsided, that I deserved to know what was happening and have a say in what comes next." Sophie pushed her textbook aside. "So I'm saying something. I think she should take the job." Sophie, Dad, listen to me. Maya loves what she does, like really loves it. The way she talks about teaching people about space, about making science accessible, that's her thing. That's what makes her happy. And this job in California would let her do that on a scale she's never had before. Sophie's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright. "If she stays here for us and gives that up, she'll wonder what she missed, and eventually she'll resent us for it. Maybe not consciously, but it'll be there." "You can't know that." "I can know that I don't want to be the reason someone gives up their dreams, and neither do you." She stood up, crossing to where Ethan stood frozen in the doorway. I love Maya. She's been amazing for you, for both of us. But if loving someone means wanting them to be happy, even when it's hard for us, then we have to let her go. Ethan pulled his daughter into a hug, marveling at her wisdom and hating that she had to be this mature at 12. When did you get so smart? I've been telling you, I've always been smart. You just keep being surprised by it. That night, Ethan sat on his back porch long after Sophie had gone to bed, staring up at stars he'd learned to identify thanks to Maya's patient teaching. Orion was rising in the east, the hunter's belt unmistakable even to his untrained eye. Maya had told him once that the light from those stars had traveled hundreds of years to reach Earth, that what he was seeing was ancient history made visible. Looking at something that no longer exists, she'd said. But it's still beautiful, isn't it? His phone rang. Maya again. I couldn't wait for you to call back, she said when he answered. I need to know what you're thinking. I'm thinking Sophie is smarter than both of us. She said you should take the job. And what do you say? Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the words form before he was ready to speak them. I say she's right. You should take it. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. You want me to leave? Maya's voice was small, hurt in a way that made Ethan's chest ache. No. I want you to stay so badly that I spent the last 3 hours trying to figure out how to convince you without being selfish about it. But wanting you to stay and asking you to give up your dreams are two different things. And I love you too much to ask you to sacrifice something this important. You love me? The question was tentative, hopeful. Of course I love you. Did you think I didn't? We haven't said it, not out loud. Ethan realized she was right. They'd built a relationship, integrated their lives, made plans and promises, but neither of them had spoken those specific words. It seemed impossible that something so fundamental had gone unsaid for so long. I love you, he said again, meaning it with every fiber of his being. I love the way you challenge me and support Sophie and make me want to be better than I am. I love that you're passionate about teaching and that you get excited about eclipses and that you keep terrible reality TV shows saved on your DVR. I love you exactly as you are, which is why you need to take this job. What if I don't want to choose between my career and you? Then we figure out how to make both work. Long distance, visits, whatever it takes. Even as he said it, Ethan felt the weight of the commitment, the difficulty of maintaining a relationship across 3,000 miles. But the alternative, asking Maya to stay and resent it, felt infinitely worse. Long distance is hard, Maya said quietly. Everything worth having is hard. That's very philosophical for someone who usually avoids philosophy. I learned from the best. Maya laughed, but it sounded suspiciously watery. Can I come over? I don't want to have this conversation on the phone. Please. She arrived 20 minutes later, still in the jeans and planetarium polo shirt she'd been wearing at work. Ethan met her at the door and pulled her into his arms before she could say anything, holding her tight enough to feel her heartbeat against his chest. I don't want to go, she said into his shoulder. But I don't want to stay and wonder what I gave up either. I know. This is terrible timing. We just got Rachel's approval. Sophie and I are finally really bonding. You and I are in a good place, and now I have to blow it all up for a job opportunity. Ethan pulled back enough to look at her face. You're not blowing anything up. You're taking the next step in your career. That's different. Is it? Because it feels like I'm choosing work over you. You're choosing your passion. That's not the same as choosing against me. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away tears she probably didn't realize she was crying. I spent 5 years not pursuing anything that made me genuinely happy because I was too scared of what it meant. I don't want you to make that same mistake. Take the job, Maya. Be brilliant at it. Show California what we already know, that you're exceptional at what you do. And what about us? We'll figure it out, together. From different time zones, maybe, but together. They went inside and sat on the couch, wrapped around each other like they could somehow prevent the inevitable separation through sheer physical proximity. They talked through logistics, how often they could visit, whether video calls would be enough, what it would mean for Sophie, who'd grown attached to Maya's presence in her life. She's going to take this hard, Maya said. I know she told you I should take the job, but she's going to be hurt. She's resilient, stronger than either of us gives her credit for. Ethan kissed the top of Maya's head. But yeah, it's going to be hard. For all of us. The following days felt both accelerated and suspended in time. Maya accepted the California position, giving her current employers notice and beginning the overwhelming process of preparing to relocate across the country. Ethan threw himself into work, using the distraction to avoid thinking too hard about what January would bring. Sophie oscillated between excitement for Maya's opportunity and quiet sadness about losing her daily presence. They made the most of the time they had left. Maya came to dinner almost every night, so they went to the planetarium together as a family, Maya giving them personal tours of exhibits she'd helped create. They took a weekend trip to a state park Sophie had been wanting to visit, camping under stars that Maya identified with the automatic ease of someone who'd been doing it her whole life. On one of those camping nights, with Sophie asleep in her tent and a fire crackling between them, Maya turned to Ethan with a serious expression. "Come with me," she said. Ethan blinked. "What?" "To California. You and Sophie. Come with me." The words tumbled out faster as she warmed to the idea. "You could transfer to a firm out there. With your experience, you'd have no problem finding something. Sophie could start fresh in a new school. We could actually build a life together instead of trying to maintain one across 3,000 miles. The offer hung in the air, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Ethan imagined it, waking up next to Maya every morning, helping Sophie navigate a new city, building something permanent instead of temporary. It was everything he wanted and everything he couldn't have. "I can't," he said quietly. "Sophie's entire support system is here. Her school, her friends, Rachel visiting regularly, the house where she still has memories of her mother, asking her to give all that up, to follow my relationship to a new state. That's not fair to her." "But you asked her. She said I should let you take the job. She didn't say we should uproot our entire lives to follow you." Ethan took Maya's hand, threading their fingers together. "And honestly, even if Sophie was completely on board, I don't think I could do it. Not because I don't love you, but because moving cross-country for a relationship after 6 months feels like rushing something that should develop naturally. We'd be building a life together out of necessity instead of readiness, and that's a recipe for resentment." Maya was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. "So we do long distance. We try long distance. We see if what we have is strong enough to survive distance and time zones, and the reality that we'll be living separate lives most of the time. And if it's not, if we try and it doesn't work, then at least we tried. At least we didn't wonder what if." Ethan squeezed her hand. "But I think it will work. I think we're worth the effort." "Promise me something," Maya said, turning to look at him. "Promise that if it stops working, if the distance becomes too much or you meet someone local or you just can't do it anymore, promise you'll tell me. Don't let it drag out because you feel obligated." "I promise. Same goes for you." "Deal." They kissed over the firelight, sealing the promise, both of them aware that they were choosing the harder path because it felt more honest than the alternatives. The weeks before Maya's departure passed in a blur of going-away parties and packing sessions and quiet moments stolen between responsibilities. The planetarium threw her a celebration that drew colleagues and community members who'd been touched by her work. Ethan watched from the sidelines as people lined up to thank her, to wish her well, to tell stories about how she'd inspired their children or reignited their passion for science. She was going to do incredible things in California. He knew it with absolute certainty. And he was going to miss her with an intensity that sometimes took his breath away. Sophie helped Maya pack on the last weekend before her move, the two of them sorting through belongings and deciding what to ship versus what to donate. Ethan could hear them talking from the next room, their voices rising and falling in easy conversation punctuated by occasional laughter. At one point, the conversation went quiet. Then he heard Sophie say, "Are you going to forget about us? Once you get to California and meet new people and get busy with the job?" Maya's response was immediate and firm. "Never. Not in a million years. You and your dad, you changed my life, Sophie. You reminded me what it felt like to be part of something bigger than myself. I'm not leaving because I want to. I'm leaving because I have to. But I'm taking you both with me, in here." A pause, probably while she pointed to her heart. Distance doesn't change how much I care about you. Promise? Promise. Cross my heart and hope to spontaneously combust in a supernova. Sophie laughed, that bright sound that meant she believed what she was hearing. Ethan leaned against the wall, blinking back tears, grateful beyond measure for this woman who'd chosen to love them even when it would have been easier not to. The day Maya left arrived with cruel sunshine and unseasonably warm weather, the kind of January day that felt like a cosmic joke. Her car was packed to capacity, the moving truck having left 2 days earlier with the bulk of her belongings. She stood on Ethan's porch, Sophie between them, the three of them reluctant to say goodbye. "This is the worst part," Maya said, her voice thick. "I hate goodbyes." "Then don't say goodbye," Sophie suggested. "Say see you later. That's what Mom used to tell me when she dropped me off at school." Maya crouched down to Sophie's level. "See you later then. In 3 weeks, when you guys fly out for President's Day weekend. I'm already planning everything we're going to do. Griffith Observatory tour, beach day, maybe the Science Center if we have time." "That sounds perfect." Sophie hugged her fiercely. "I'm going to miss you." "I'm going to miss you too, so much." Maya held on for a long moment, then pulled back and stood. "Okay, your dad's turn. Go inside for a minute." Sophie nodded and disappeared into the house, giving them privacy. Ethan pulled Maya into his arms, memorizing the feeling of her against him, the way she fit perfectly under his chin, the smell of her shampoo, the warmth of her skin through her sweater. 3,000 miles, he said. That's a long way. Only physically. In every other way that matters, I'm right here. I love you. I need you to know that. Even if I don't say it enough, even if the distance makes it hard, I love you. I love you too, so much that it scares me sometimes. Maya pulled back to look at him, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. We're going to make this work. Yeah? Yeah, because the alternative is unacceptable. I didn't spend 6 months falling for you and Sophie just to let geography ruin it. They kissed one last time, pouring everything they couldn't say into the contact. Then Maya stepped back, picked up the last bag from the porch, and walked to her car. She turned once more before getting in, waving at where Sophie had reappeared in the doorway. And then she was gone, taillights disappearing down the street, leaving a hole in their daily lives that felt impossibly vast. The first few weeks were the hardest. The house felt too quiet without Maya's unexpected visits. Sophie's mood swung between fine and withdrawn. Ethan threw himself into work, staying late at the office because going home just reminded him of what was missing. But they adapted, the way humans always do. Video calls became routine. Breakfast with Maya's California morning coffee became part of their schedule. They texted throughout the day, sharing small moments and observations. Maya sent care packages filled with California-specific treats and astronomy magazines for Sophie. They counted down the days until President's Day weekend with the anticipation of people who'd learned to find joy in the waiting. The visit to California exceeded every expectation. Sophie fell in love with Griffith Observatory, with its Art Deco architecture and the way Los Angeles sprawled beneath it like a glittering circuit board. Maya's apartment was small but filled with the personality Ethan had missed, books and star charts and photographs of them on the refrigerator. They spent 3 days exploring the city, eating too much, laughing too hard, existing in the bubble of togetherness before real life resumed. The goodbye at LAX was brutal, but not devastating, because this time, they had proof that it could work. That distance was just a logistical problem, not an emotional one. The months that followed established a rhythm. Ethan and Sophie flew to California once a month. Maya came back east whenever she had long weekends. They video called daily, sometimes just to exist in the same digital space while doing separate tasks. It wasn't perfect. There were missed connections and time zone conflicts and moments when the loneliness felt crushing. But there were also late-night conversations and shared excitement over Maya's growing success at Griffith and the knowledge that they were choosing each other over and over, despite the difficulty. Sophie's 13th birthday in March brought all of them together. Maya flew in for the weekend, joining Rachel and Ethan's parents and Sophie's friends for a celebration that felt wonderfully normal, despite the complicated logistics that made it possible. At one point during the party, Ethan found Maya on the back porch, watching the chaos through the window. "You okay?" he asked, joining her. "More than okay. I was just thinking about the wedding, the night we met. How impossible all of this would have seemed back then." "What part? The long-distance relationship or the fact that we made it work?" "Both, all of it." She leaned against him. "I told you to stop staring at the bride and look at me. And you did. And it changed everything. Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Maya corrected. "The best was deciding to keep choosing me even when it got hard." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching Sophie blow out candles through the window, surrounded by people who loved her. "I've been thinking," Maya said carefully. "My contract at Griffith is up for renewal in August. They'll want an answer by June about whether I'm staying." Ethan's heart stuttered. And I'm thinking I don't want to stay. Not in California. Not away from you and Sophie." She turned to face him fully. "The job is amazing. The opportunity is everything I hoped it would be. But it's not home. Your home, Sophie's home. And I'm tired of living 3,000 miles away from home. Maya, you can't give up. I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing what matters most. There's a difference." She smiled, that confident smile that had first caught his attention at the wedding. "Besides, the planetarium here has been trying to recruit me for months. Apparently word got out about the programs I developed at Griffith. They're offering me associate director, full creative control, budget increase. It's not the same as Griffith, but it's still incredible. And it's here. Are you sure? This is a huge decision. I've never been more sure of anything. Distance taught me that I can live without seeing you every day, but I don't want to, not when there's an alternative." She took his hands. "So I'm coming home, if you'll have me." Ethan pulled her into a kiss that tasted like relief and joy and the promise of actual permanence. When they broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "We'll have you, always." The announcement of Maya's return sent Sophie into orbit, her excitement palpable as she helped plan Maya's homecoming. Rachel sent a text that just read "finally" in all caps. Even Ethan's parents, who'd met Maya briefly during the birthday visit, expressed their pleasure at the news. Maya finished out her contract at Griffith in July, returning to her old life with new experience and the kind of confidence that came from proving you could succeed at the highest level. The planetarium welcomed her back with enthusiasm, immediately putting her to work on expanding their education programs. On a warm evening in early August, exactly 1 year after they'd camped under the stars and made promises about long distance, Ethan invited Maya to dinner. Just the two of them this time. Sophie was at a friend's house, giving them space for something Ethan had been planning for weeks. They ate on the back porch, watching fireflies emerge as the sun set. Maya talked about her first week back, about the programs she wanted to implement, about how good it felt to be home. Ethan listened, nervous energy making it hard to focus on the words. Finally, as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, he stood up. "Come here," he said, extending his hand. "I want to show you something." He led her into the yard to the spot where Sophie's old telescope stood, the one Maya had helped them buy last Christmas, teaching them both how to use it properly. "Look," Ethan said, positioning the telescope. "Jupiter. And the moons you showed me that first night." Maya looked through the eyepiece, smiling. "Still beautiful, still humbling. Still reminds me of the night I told you I loved you for the first time." Ethan took a breath, steadying himself. "Maya, you told me at that wedding to stop staring at the bride and look at you. And I did. And you were right. You are right. You're everything I need to see. Everything I want to see for the rest of my life." He pulled the small box from his pocket and dropped to one knee. Maya's hand flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. "I know we've only been together a year. I know conventional wisdom says we should wait longer, be more certain, follow some imaginary timeline. But I've already lost enough time in my life. I've already waited through enough loneliness. I don't want to wait anymore." He opened the box, revealing the ring he'd spent weeks choosing, simple, elegant, with a small sapphire the color of deep space. "Marry me, Maya. Build a life with me and Sophie. Show me the stars every night, and remind me to look at what's real instead of what's gone. Please." Yes. The word came out choked with emotion. Yes, of course, yes. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and pulled her into a kiss that felt like every promise they'd made to each other condensed into a single moment. When they broke apart, both laughing and crying, Maya held up her hand to watch the ring catch the porch light. It's perfect, she said. You're perfect. This is perfect. Nothing's perfect, but it's ours. That's better. They called Sophie immediately, who screamed so loudly that Ethan had to hold the phone away from his ear. She demanded pictures of the ring, details about the proposal, and confirmation that she could be in the wedding. Rachel called minutes later. Sophie had clearly spread the news, offering congratulations and threats about what would happen if Ethan messed this up. That night, with Maya asleep beside him in the bed they'd be sharing for the rest of their lives, Ethan thought about the journey that had brought them here. The wedding where they'd met. The months of circling each other. The fear and grief he'd had to work through to allow himself this happiness. The distance that had tested them, and the reunion that proved they could survive anything. He thought about Sarah too, about the love they'd shared and the life that had ended too soon. The grief was still there, probably always would be. But it coexisted now with joy instead of consuming it. He could hold both the memory of what he'd lost and the reality of what he'd found, could honor the past while building the future. The wedding took place 6 months later in February, on the grounds of the planetarium where they'd had their first date. It was small, just family and close friends, but it felt exactly right. Sophie served as maid of honor, wearing a dress she'd picked out herself, and a smile that rivaled the winter sun. Rachel cried through the entire ceremony. Maya's parents, won over completely by witnessing their daughter's happiness, welcomed Ethan and Sophie into their family with open arms. They exchanged vows under a clear sky, promising to love each other through distance and difficulty, through grief and joy, through all the complications that came with building a family from broken pieces. When the officiant pronounced them married, the gathered crowd erupted in applause that echoed across the planetarium grounds. At the reception afterward, in the same hotel ballroom where they'd met, Ethan found himself standing near a marble pillar. But this time, he wasn't alone. This time, Maya was beside him, her hand in his, both of them watching the celebration they'd created. Remember this? Maya gestured to the pillar. Where you were hiding when I found you? I wasn't hiding. I was observing from a safe distance. You were absolutely hiding. She kissed his cheek. Good thing I'm terrible at respecting people's safe distances. Best terrible quality anyone's ever had. Sophie appeared beside them, dragging them both toward the dance floor. Come on! You have to dance! It's your wedding! So they danced, the three of them together, in the same ballroom where everything had started. The music swelled around them, conversations and laughter creating a symphony of celebration. Other couples joined them on the floor. Rachel dancing with Maya's father, Ethan's parents swaying together after 45 years of marriage, friends and family all orbiting around the joy at the center. Ethan caught Maya's eye across the circle of their dancing and mouthed, "I love you." She mouthed it back, her smile bright enough to rival the chandelier overhead. Later, when the reception was winding down and guests were beginning to leave, Ethan stood at the window overlooking the gardens. The same gardens where they'd listened to that concert, where he'd first started to believe that maybe happiness was possible again. Maya joined him, slipping her arm through his. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I almost didn't come to that first wedding, that I almost let fear keep me home, and if I had, I would have missed all of this. But you didn't. You showed up. You were brave enough to be uncomfortable. You made me be brave. You demanded it." Maya rested her head on his shoulder. "We made each other brave. That's how it works." Sophie came over to join them, still energized despite the late hour. "Can we go stargazing tomorrow, all three of us?" "Absolutely," Maya said. "I'll bring the telescope. Your dad can bring the snacks. You can bring the questions you've undoubtedly been saving up." "I have so many questions." "I know you do. I'm counting on it." They stood together at the window, three people who'd found each other against the odds and chosen to build something permanent from the temporary. Outside, the night sky spread infinite and unknowable, full of stars that had traveled light years to be seen. Ethan thought about what Maya had told him once. that looking at stars meant looking at history, at light from suns that might no longer exist. But it was still beautiful, still worth seeing. The same was true for his life. His past with Sarah was still there, still beautiful in memory, even though it no longer existed in the present. But this, Maya's hand in his, Sophie planning tomorrow's adventure, the life they were building together, this was equally beautiful. This was real. "Stop staring at the bride," Maya had said that first night. "Look at me." He was looking now. At Maya, at Sophie, at the future they were creating one choice at a time. At the family they'd become not through biology or obligation, but through the harder, more meaningful work of showing up and staying and loving each other through the complicated mess of being human. The wedding guests dwindled to a handful. The music quieted. The staff began cleaning up, moving around them with practiced efficiency. But Ethan, Maya, and Sophie stayed at the window, reluctant to end the night, to step back into regular life after the magic of celebration. "Ready to go home?" Maya asked eventually. Home. Not her apartment or his house, but the space they'd create together. The life they'd build brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. "Yeah," Ethan said, pulling both of them close. "Let's go home." They walked out of the ballroom together, past the marble pillar where it had all started, through doors that opened onto a future none of them could have predicted, but all of them had chosen. The night was cold but clear, stars visible despite the city lights, infinite and patient, and willing to wait for anyone brave enough to look up. And as they drove home through familiar streets, Sophie talking excitedly about tomorrow's stargazing plan from the back seat, Maya's hand resting on Ethan's knee, Ethan felt the last piece of resistance finally fall away. The guilt that had lived in his chest for 5 years, the fear that happiness meant forgetting, the belief that he didn't deserve a second chance at love, all of it dissolved into the simple truth that grief and joy could coexist, that endings and beginnings weren't opposites but partners in the dance of a life fully lived. He'd survived the worst thing he could imagine. He'd raised a daughter who was brave and brilliant and kind. He'd learned to open his heart again when it would have been easier to keep it closed, and he'd found someone who saw all his broken pieces and loved him not despite them, but because they were part of who he'd become. That night, in the house that was now officially theirs together, Ethan stood on the back porch while Maya put Sophie to bed. He could hear them through the open window, Maya reading from Sophie's favorite astronomy book, their voices mingling in comfortable rhythm. The stars overhead were the same stars he'd looked at alone 5 years ago, drowning in grief and believing the darkness would never lift. But he wasn't alone anymore. He wasn't drowning anymore. He was standing on solid ground, surrounded by love, looking up at an infinite universe that suddenly seemed full of possibility instead of emptiness. Maya joined him on the porch, sliding into his arms like she'd been doing it forever. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Everything. Nothing. How lucky I am. How scared I was. How glad I am that you didn't let me stay scared. You did the hard part. You chose to try. I just gave you a reason to. You gave me more than that. You gave me a future I'd stopped believing in." They stood together in the darkness, two people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment, even though it had felt like the wrong one at the time. The night air was cool and filled with the sounds of suburban life settling down for sleep. Inside, Sophie was probably already unconscious, exhausted from the day's excitement. Tomorrow, they'd wake up and start their new life together, officially and permanently. But tonight, this moment, was all Ethan needed. Maya in his arms, Sophie safe and happy inside, a future stretching ahead of them like an unwritten story, blank pages waiting to be filled with whatever they chose to create. "I love you," he said, the words easier now than they'd ever been. "I love you too, forever, if you'll have me." Forever sounds perfect, and it did. Not because it would be easy or simple or free from pain, but because it would be theirs, built together, chosen daily, earned through the hard work of showing up and staying and loving each other through whatever came next. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, indifferent and eternal. But underneath them, on a back porch, in a house filled with love and laughter and the promise of tomorrow, two people held each other close and chose to be happy. And that, finally, was enough.